that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of...
Fingers could be pointed.
You carry on taking the medication, George. Yes, I'd send all the Labour government to space with a one-way ticket and throw in the SNP for being useless. They're all a bunch of... Oh, all right, fair enough.
One person, quite frankly, I think needs to go to space in a one-way journey is Jeremy Kyle. He goes on about his age one more time, how he's 60 this year, he was 59 last year, repetitively over the course of the weeks and months. We have to hear him, I'm 60 this year, I'm 60 this year.
Richard Tice, did you put that cheeky bugger up to that?
I'm hoping he's going to send me the invoice because that was absolutely brilliant.
Which MP would you send to space?
Oh, no, I'll get in terrible trouble if I answer that. But it's fair to say there's quite a long list.
The sad thing is about sending people into space on a one-way ticket is I don't think that we've built a spaceship big enough to take the lunatics off this planet. I mean, from the net zero loonies to the transgender loonies to the racists to the terrorists, there is just so much to the wokerati. We need some big spaceships.
Big spaceships.
Good evening. I never know how you're going to start this conversation, Jeremy.
Katy Perry went to space today, OK? Who would you send... I'd love her to say what I wanted to, but I'd never disrespect her. Who would you send to space who could never come back?
Well, I'd be happy to send Ed Miliband to space, I think.
Oh, that is an outrageous question, so I'm not even going to answer that question.
Sam Matterface, so you get the job, yeah? Come on.
No, Sam Matterface, I tell you what... There's no.
I think David Lammy would be the person I'd want to send up in space and never come back again.
Yeah, the problem is how much would the bill be for him to munch through whatever food on the way there?
Hey, it worked.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome to the show. Absolute pleasure to have your company. This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and we're just approaching 3 minutes past 10 o'clock. I have a rip-roaring show ahead for you, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device. It is absolutely fabulous to have you joining us. Don't forget, if you ever miss any of the show, you can check out my YouTube page. I know, I've had one for a while. I wasn't really aware of it. I'm not going to lie. YouTube page is called, you'll never guess this, The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. I know. It's very, very easy to find. So do hit subscribe. You'll never miss anything. Lots and lots of engagement with what we were doing yesterday. I think you all had the same problem I had with Yvonne Ridley on the Greta flotilla, but we'll talk about all that, no doubt, but plenty more coming up. Of course, while we were on air yesterday at midday, we had that announcement that Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, was having a, well, humiliating U-turn over the winter fuel allowance. It was one of the first things that she announced was axing the winter fuel payments to pretty much all but the very, very poorest pensioners on pensioner credit last July. It was within weeks of the Labour Party taking office. Now she has been forced to U-turn because it's pretty much one of the most unpopular policies of all time. It's really, you know, Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves' poll tax, is it not? This time, though, of course, with the announcement at midday yesterday, they're going to return it to 9 million pensioners. Basically, if you're earning 35 grand a year or less, you'll get it. If you're a well-off pensioner, you won't. I mean, OK, that all seems fine, but why didn't they do that first up? Because they've already spent the money that they said that they needed to get to save from that cut. But lots of calls now for Rachel Reeves to apologise to pensioners, particularly those who basically had to choose whether to heat or eat last winter. I want to hear from you. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text 87222. You can also get in touch, as you well know, on X at talkTV. and I'd love to hear from you, whether you want to get in touch in any of those modes. And calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. But if you're one of the pensioners who's affected, you did lose it, you're going to get it back. I'd love to hear from you if you really object to it being reinstated. I mean, because if we had all those problems in the economy that meant we had to axe the winter fuel allowance for millions of pensioners, I'm not entirely aware things have got better since. By the way, the unemployment figures have just been announced a few hours ago, and it's gone up. Plus, we're also going to be talking about the lovely little Greta Thunberg and her Freedom Flotilla activists. They're being deported from Israel after it was revealed that Greta was being held in an Israeli prison after troops intercepted the vessel making its way to Gaza with its not really actual supplies of aid. It was all about getting the selfies, really, wasn't it? Plus, people in Britain had a better start stumping up for defence spending up to 5%, says NATO's Secretary-General Mark Rutte, or they better learn to speak Russian. It's a fairly stark warning. Do you heed that warning? We'll talk about that, plenty more besides, loads of top guests, some of whom will annoy the hell out of me and you, but hey, that's the gig. One person here today there who will not annoy us at all, who I'm delighted to say I get to see, my lovely colleague, erstwhile sometimes colleague and political commentator, Russell Quirk is joining us today.
Good morning, glad to be back.
It's always lovely to see you.
It's been a while. It has
been a while. Well,
here I am.
There was that petition.
There was, yes, and the Ofcom thing. I still exist. Here I am.
Here he is. I'm sure we're always delighted. Send your message to support him. We're delighted to have Russell back in the studio. Russell, let's talk about the U-turn on winter fuel. The economy's been sorted now, and that's why they can afford to give winter fuel payments back to millions of pensioners they took it away from last winter. Fair enough, yeah?
No.
Okay, just
because that, I'm afraid, is another Labour lie. Would you believe?
Politicians lying.
And we're kind of losing count of those Labour lies, I think. And let's not forget that even before the election, and certainly for the weeks and months after the election, Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer made great stock of the fact there was this huge £22 billion black hole left by the Conservatives, which, of course, the Office of Budget Responsibility could not find. Odd, that.
They looked.
They looked, can't find it. Rachel Reeves is still referring to it. I think in her speech yesterday she mentioned it about 11 times. And despite that apparent black hole, she has now gone ahead and made it even more gaping, I suppose, logically, by rescinding this humiliating U-turn on the winter fuel allowance, but not least the fact that, of course, this Labour government are spending and spending and spending.
They have interesting priorities, don't they? Now, I think there's a perfectly good argument for, high-earning pensioners with loads and loads of savings not to be getting 300 quid from other hard-working taxpayers who are struggling to pay their bills for childcare, put food on the table, put fuel in the car, to get to pay their heating bills. I think that's a perfectly reasonable argument. Yep. And for years I've been saying I don't think the winter fuel payment should be a one-off £300 payment in here you are, the beneficence of the Chancellor, here you are, your £300 to pay your heating bill. I think it's humiliating, I think it's demeaning, it should be part of the pension. We have one of the lowest state pensions in the world now. There's lots of different in Europe, so there are different reasons for that in terms of how payments are made. However, there was always possible to do a version of means testing at the top end, because if you're paying a certain rate of tax, then you're not going to get it. But that's actually quite a small number of people. I mean, 3/4 of pensioners will now be getting the winter fuel allowance. Question is, should she apologise? There was no sense of, you know what, we did the wrong thing. It was wrong. We've listened. They did a little bit of we listened, but mostly it was all about the economy's fine now.
If only for some humility in politics. I mean, an apology from a politician is literally as rare as a hen's tooth, isn't it? It just doesn't happen. But it'd be nice to hear every now and again, I think. This is clearly not just something that affected pensioners. I mean, we have gone through a winter, of course, where that winter fuel allowance was removed. It was, I think, verging on evil. I mean, I think it was, quite frankly, an atrocious thing to do. But let's be clear as well that when it was, I was going to get to that. Yeah. So when it was first introduced, you could argue that it was political because it was designed to appease, if you like, and to gather more votes from pensioners.
It wasn't. It was really clear at the time.
But to do the opposite now and to alienate.
Pensioners don't vote for us; they vote Tory. We don't care if we.
But that's why they took it away.
Yes. That's what it was.
And of course, there's been a huge backlash. So the excuse, the fib, the lie, the deceit that this U-turn is as a consequence of the economy being being fixed. And you just referred to the unemployment numbers, as I'm sure we'll get to later on. This economy is far, far from being fixed. There is only one reason why they have U-turned in a humiliating way on the winter fuel allowance, and that is because the polls are destroying
exactly. But the thing is, we were told that axing the universal winter fuel payments would raise £1.5 billion this year. Now it looks like the figures are revised figures from the Treasury state the policy would still raise £450 million. But Steve Webb, who's a former pensions minister, and he says actually he's done some work numbers. He says it will raise just £250 million. Bearing in mind that £1.5 billion has already been spent on other things.
And let's be clear what the total budget of this government, this country, is. Our money, of course. Let's remind ourselves it's not the government's money. It is our money. It's taxpayers' money. Is about £900 billion. So this risk, this political faux pas, was done in exchange for saving what is actually a tiny, tiny amount of money in the scheme of things. It was a real political shooting in the foot.
Well, I mean, again, everything is absolutely fine, and the economy is all sorted. They've got us all back on, even keel. Everyone is feeling, I don't know about you, you go to the supermarket, everything's fine. So inflation going up and unemployment going up. Now, the UK's jobless rate was announced again this morning, 7 o'clock, the regular figures. These are the figures for the 3 months to April. The new unemployment rate is up from 4.5%, that's 1.6 million people, to 4.6%. Now, it's a tiny increase. You think, oh, what difference that make? It's the highest rate since July 2021, when we'd just come out of, the second big lockdown. That is very worrying. Now, compared to, France and many other countries, it is not, at the scary end, but it is creeping up and up. And I think what's also crucial is Jamie Jenkins, brilliant statistician, big friend of the show. He was quoted in the Sun front page yesterday for some of his latest figures on. You look at the cost of asylum hotels. That was it 4.6 billion or something. It's equivalent of the tax paid by everyone in Manchester, or the population. Even if everyone in Manchester, the children of the pensioners all paid tax, it would be all their tax. But he was a statistician in health, but also in looking at employment at the Office for National Statistics. He is someone who can genuinely crunch the numbers and knows what he's talking about. And he's looked at the numbers in terms of payroll jobs. So there's lots of figures, aren't there? There's employment rates, there's available employment, there's unemployment, there's benefits claimants. There's lots of different kinds of figures. You kind of have to mash it all together to get a big picture. But he looked at payroll jobs, the jobs that are actually being paid. Staff jobs, payroll jobs, they have dropped by 109,000 in the month of May. It's the biggest monthly fall since lockdowns. That's 274,000 fewer jobs than a year ago. And it really does look like it's part of the economy, it's confidence, it's also the national insurance hikes, minimum wage hikes as well. And I certainly know a friend of mine who runs a small business was saying normally, and in the IT world, and he was saying that normally, when you're trying to, in recent years, you're trying to hire people have got other jobs. It's basically been an employee market. And now it's an employer's market. And it's really noticeable that when people are applying for jobs, they're not coming from another company and wanting a step up. They haven't had a job since last year. But that's quite telling.
This is what happens when ideology clashes with reality. The ideology of persecuting businesses by way of Rachel Reeves' £20 billion jobs tax back in the budget last year. And the consequence of that, as we are now seeing in real life, is that, guess what? Employers decide that if they're going to be taxed more, they simply won't invest in people and their businesses as much. Who knew?
I mean,
who knew that would happen? It's an obvious consequence.
Literally everybody, and everyone warned them, but they did it anyway.
Reeves, yes. And the left, the Labour front bench now will be saying, look, this is just a blip. If you look at the last 2 or 3 months' worth of unemployment figures, this is now a trend. This is now a direction of travel. Let us also not forget the Labour Party, Labour governments have never, ever left unemployment lower at the end of their office.
Not once. Not once, absolutely.
Labour isn't working, remember
Indeed.
that?
Listen, I'm just going to bring you some breaking news. We'll try and get some more details on this. So reports of an attack at a school in Austria, and reports claiming that 7 people, possibly including children, have been killed. We don't know any more details than that at the current time that I can report to you. As soon as we get more information, I'm going to bring it to you here. But reports of an attack and several dead in an attack on a school in Austria. I think a lot of us will jump to conclusions.
Let's not do that.
Let's wait and see what facts we have on that. But listen, I do want to still hear from you on particularly on the winter fuel allowance cut. Should the Chancellor apologise to pensioners? Obviously tying in that the whole, the economy and where we are. Give us a call 0344 499 1000. Let's also talk about what we are spending money on, and it does appear nuclear power plants. Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary, your friend and mine, so on each other's Christmas card lists, I can't tell you. He sends me 5 Christmas cards because he loves me so much. But today he's committing £14.2 billion to building 2 giant reactors at Sizewell in Suffolk. They are capable of producing electricity for 6 million homes. Even if the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing, it's almost like they're quite reliable, these nuclear power plants. Now, I applaud this. This is a good thing. We need to keep the lights on. The reason why we need to build more nuclear reactors to keep the lights on is because of this reliance on solar and wind. And we're going to have solar and wind, and when they're not working, we're going to have the nuclear power. We could just have the nuclear power and it would be easier and cheaper. The question is the amount of money that's going in, and we'll talk to Donica McCarthy later on. Take a deep breath, everybody. This is in addition to £3.6 billion from the last Tory government. It means that Sizewell C is going to receive a total of almost 18 billion quid in public money. More to follow, obviously. But bearing in mind that the one that's currently being built at the moment, which is Hinkley Point C in Somerset, that is already likely to cost, they think now, 50 billion quid before it opens, probably 2031. I mean, Hinkley won't open way any time before that. Extraordinary. Hinkley Point C is more than 4 times more expensive on a pound for megawatt basis than the average nuclear power plant built in South Korea. I mean, we just simply can't do this stuff efficiently, and for many, many different reasons, partly because we don't build enough of them.
Well, and maybe if we hadn't not opened a nuclear power plant since 1995...
That might be part of
which
the
Keir
issue.
Starmer was trumpeting on X this morning. I'm thinking, hang on a sec, wasn't your party in power until 2010? Wasn't it Nick Clegg of the Liberal Democrats that said in 2010 we shouldn't bother with nuclear because we won't get a nuclear power station open until at least 2020?
Yeah.
Wow.
2022, I think he was saying, but he was laughing. Like, of course you don't. That's not going to solve our energy problem. And this is a problem. The basic problem we've got is we don't have a lot of manufacturing expertise anymore. Instead of just taking the expertise from another country like France or South Korea, great, you're building loads of these. Can you come over and do it here? And we get the Chinese involved briefly for some reason. What the hell was anyone thinking there? I mean, that's properly insane. They chop and change the different policies all the time. But also we are abjectly terrible at long-term planning. And if you want to do energy, you need long-term planning.
And you know why? It's because I'm afraid politicians, as we all know, have a very, very short shelf life, particularly those on the front bench.
Yep.
And I suspect it's because they only want to announce things, particularly with public money, that they themselves will get the credit
benefit from. But again, they don't. But again, I also hold the civil servants to blame for this. I mean, I tell you who's been doing the rounds a lot lately. Simon Case. He's on all the Sunday morning shows, the former cabinet secretary, the one who just sat there while everyone was having parties in the middle of lockdown. But apparently he didn't do anything wrong. He was unable to do his job or appear at the COVID inquiry, but apparently completely able to do telly now, so it's obviously fine. But again, these civil servants, they should be sitting there with cabinet ministers, with the Prime Minister, with the Chancellor, and saying, seriously, you need to do this because we won't have any energy and the lights are going to go out in 2029 if you don't. And they don't do that.
So is it a rare moment of applause for Ed Miliband? Bearing in mind that this is not new news. I mean, of course, the previous government said that Sizewell obviously needed to be rebuilt and expanded and so on. But the question is, it's £14 billion. Hang on, let's go back to that black hole again. Where's the £14 billion coming from?
Exactly. Well, also, here's another area where we don't do long-term planning and where we have to spend an awful lot of money, and that is defence. The NATO chief, NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte, he was in the UK yesterday. He was giving a speech at Chatham House, a meeting with the PM. But this is the starkest warning ever. He said he was really impressed by the Prime Minister's strategic defence review unveiled last week, which doesn't even come close to hitting even... I mean, the 2.5% of the GDP is going to be, is tentative in the next few years. 3% is just an ambition, and that would be not for basically another 10 years. Way below the 5% that NATO is calling for and America is calling for. But he said, very, very stark, British people better learn to speak Russian if we don't massively ramp up defence spending. That is the reality, isn't it?
No, I think that's
You
an
disagree?
absolute load of old nonsense. I think this spectre of Russia invading Britain is another COVID.
Russia isn't going to invade Britain. That's not what they're talking about.
It's another COVID. It's another climate change. Don't we think?
Really think that?
Yeah, I do. I think the governments love to put us in a state of fear because that means they can control us and they can tax us more.
I agree with you on that. However, they also don't want to have to spend a load of stuff money on defence rather than spending on
Julia,
the nurses and stuff that they get the cred for.
Shock horror. The Secretary General of NATO wants more money to be spent on his.
The Secretary General of NATO probably is privy to an awful lot of information. Look, we have seen in recent months there is clear, even with Keir Starmer, who we expected to perhaps be a little bit softer than the Tories on the issue of Ukraine and dealing with Russia. Not so. Not so. And I think that's telling you. I think they are seeing an awful lot of what's going on. I mean, but, you know, is the Polish government ramping this up, or the Baltic states ramping this up, or is Finland ramping this up? Because they're all expressing the same concerns.
Maybe the big consideration should be if we don't all ramp up, then the United States might leave NATO. I mean, Trump has threatened to do that because he said, I'm not going to keep propping you guys up.
Why should he? Why should America keep propping us up?
Of course not. And
exactly. So we need to do. Well, why should taxpayers in America be funding our defence? Do you think we shouldn't be defending Ukraine?
Do I think we shouldn't be defending Ukraine?
You think we shouldn't help Ukraine?
I think that there should be more accountability to the money trail, frankly.
Always.
The billions, well, there isn't.
Always.
There's no transparency whatsoever.
A huge amount of corruption in war.
And I also think that whether it's
But that's not the question I asked
Boris Johnson or Keir Starmer, I think they are grandstanding over Ukraine.
Prime Ministers like to do that.
They love it.
That wasn't the question I asked you.
Yeah, I think we should, but then I think that Ukraine
we should be funding Ukraine and helping their military efforts.
But I think the way to do it is simply for Ukraine to enter NATO.
But Turkey and others wouldn't let Ukraine.
Because then the problem goes away.
No, actually, under the rules of NATO, you actually can't join if you're in a conflict.
Yeah, OK, well, they should have
I think they should have been allowed to
hindsight.
NATO in advance. Other people would say Russia would say that was provocation. But we should be helping them. If we're going to help them, we can't even help ourselves. We don't even have an army or sufficient
Well, we can't even protect
resources.
our own borders.
We can't protect, exactly, a point I've made a million times. But do you not think, therefore, we need to ramp up our own defences so we can help our allies, which is which we have signed up to in the NATO treaty?
I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't increase defence spending. I think it's appalling that we have spent less and less and less in real terms over the last 20 years. What my concern is when you've got people like the Secretary General of NATO almost threatening the public by saying you're going to be speaking Russian in 10 years if we don't spend more money on my train set. That's what I object to.
I'm not. I mean, I do understand that, but it is a fair point that, I mean, you know, again, we're as some very, very senior military figures in Britain have been pointing out, you know, we are in sort of appeasement territory in 1937 right now. In terms of appeasement territory, what do you make of these Foreign Office staff who've done one of those ghastly, pompous... Well, I mean, we were students and people listened to us then, and now we work at the Foreign Office and we're civil servants. We're going to write to the government and say we're terribly unhappy with the policy we've got on Gaza. I don't know why they are, because it's basically Hamas appeasement quite a lot of the time. And that we're unhappy about it, and we want we disagree over Gaza policy. They're accusing the government of potential complicity in Israel's conduct in Gaza. There's a staff letter seen by the BBC. They probably wrote it, the BBC. And it's been sent to the Foreign Secretary David Lammy last month. Interestingly, the response came back from the two most senior civil servants at the Foreign Office, Ollie Robbins, boo hiss, Nick Dyer, but they basically said, look, if you disagree, your ultimate recourse is to resign. This is an honourable course.
Brilliant.
Yeah, resign. Yeah, seriously, guys.
Just do that. And can we extend that to Border Force and the Home Office as well?
And David Lammy.
And David Lammy. All of the civil servants that have blocked successive attempts to try and control our borders. We know that comes down to a lot of the civil servants' activism. I think they should reread their employment contracts, Julia, because the word civil servant has the word servant in it.
It's really that simple.
Yes.
No one
do as you're told.
You're working in government. Literally, no one asks you. Then their argument is always it's illegal. Again, they've got this. You know, you're only operating under British law.
Do as you're told, or try and work in the private sector and see how you get on.
Yeah, good luck with that. Let's just also finally, just in this section, let's talk about Greta Thunberg and her little freedom flotilla. And their help for the huge amount of aid they were able to take with their aid flotilla symbolic amount of aid. Symbolic amount of aid they took on their little boat to Gaza. They didn't get to Gaza. They were intercepted by the Israelis, given some sandwiches and water. They were very happy about it. Israeli officials said they were going to make them watch that video, the 45-minute video, was shown to many journalists, compiled of basic Hamas footage of things of the reality of what actually happened on October the 7th. Since these are the many people like my guest yesterday, Yvonne Ridley and others, who basically it's equivalent to Holocaust denial. They can't deny it happened. Or it's been overhyped, these phrases like that. They refused to watch the video. They have been taken to the airport. They are being deported. I thought it was very interesting that Greta made an appeal to the Swedish people and the Swedish government and asked for pressure to be put on. The Swedish government went, nah, your problem, not ours. What I rather love.
Even further, I think one of the ministers in Sweden said, actually, because of your actions, you have now clogged up the phone lines of the government and embassies, stopping genuine people that do need help from getting through to the support that they need. So well done, Greta.
It's all about Greta.
Can I just suggest that we employ the Israelis to help us with our border problems?
Oh, yes. I mean,
problem solved.
Absolutely.
Give them the 500 million a year, not the French.
Absolutely. Love to hear your thoughts on all of that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Keep you up to date when we get some more information about the reports of some sort of attack on a school in Austria. Reports that between 5 and 7 people dead. We don't know if that involves children, but certainly several people are dead. We'll get the information on that as soon as we can. More from Russell Quirk, more from me coming up, and we'll of course be taking your calls as well. I say 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
Is unacceptable, absolutely right. But you have to remember, hotels are only booked when the government doesn't have adequate accommodation that it's provided for asylum seekers. And let's be clear about it. The law says, the Refugee Convention and our local domestic law puts a legal obligation on the government to provide basic housing, and quite often it's shared. And also, asylum seekers don't get a choice of where they live.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Russell Quirk's still with me. Let's get up to date on that breaking news from Austria. At least 5 people, we understand that does include students at a secondary school, have been killed in what was, the police report was a shooting attack in the Austrian city of Graz. An operation is underway there with armed officers, a police tactical unit, the Cobra unit there, several emergency services and a police helicopter. It's been described as a major police operation following a shooting spree, is what the local broadcaster has been referring to, after hot shots were heard in the building. We understand that 5 people have been killed, at least 2 others injured, and those deaths include students at the secondary school. We don't know who the shooter is, the motives, or any of those other details as yet. As we get them, we'll bring that information to you. Right now, let's go to your phone calls. I've been asking you about Rachel Reeves U-turning on her winter fuel cut. Should the Chancellor apologise to pensioners? Actually, I'll get a couple of text messages as well. Anthony says, yes, she should apologise and then immediately resign. She's beyond useless and will push the economy off a cliff edge. Joe says, if she did apologise, would it be sincere? And again, Chris says she should apologise and then resign. Michael says, I think Rachel from Accounts is best placed on the back benches. My guess is the country will breathe a sigh of relief and she'll no doubt be in a happier place. Win-win. I'm pretty sure Keir Starmer will be quite happy to have her doing that. Jane says we don't want a fake apology. We want a resignation. We want the so-called mainstream media calling for her and Starmer to go. I don't think it is the job of the media. Well, mainstream. I don't think it's certainly not the job of the BBC, to call for anyone to go.
Conservatives as well.
Yeah, they're doing untold damage, says Jane, to this country, and all but a handful of journalists are calling them out. Oh, Dwayne says, is she living in a fantasy world? How on earth is she going to fund this? Let's go to Darren, who's on the line in Coventry. Hello, Darren.
Good morning, Julia. Not Coventry anymore, left Zara Sultana's socialist hole, now down in Devon. But that's not why I'm calling. I'm calling about the winter fuel allowance.
Yeah.
And people asking Ed Miliband, will the government apologise? The point is, it's not about U-turn. It is about, why do we even need a winter fuel allowance?
Yeah.
It's because of ridiculous energy policy.
Ta-da!
In this country, we have expensive energy because of government.
Yeah.
And if they think the winter fuel allowance saves life, they're saying that their own policies that they're doubling down on are killing people.
Yeah, no, you're quite right. Also, I'm not sure that 300 quid even covers, even remotely, most of the increase in our fuel. I mean, bearing in mind, it went up loads. It didn't then come, I mean, it went down a little bit, but it didn't come down back at where it used to be. My energy bill is still double where it used to be a few years ago.
Absolutely, and don't accept any flim-flam that this is the Ukraine crisis energy thing. All that's gone. This is absolutely down to Ed Miliband and that department increasing the tax and the subsidies on energy.
Can I point out, this has been a Tory policy for years as well. No, this has been a long-term Tory policy too. They're both to blame on this.
So I want to hear Farage, I want to hear Badenoch, instead of saying, why have you U-turned, saying, why do we need it? Why do we need a winter fuel allowance? You need to stop and get some sensible energy policy in this country.
I'm loving your work, Darren. I'm loving it. I'm sure people are agreeing with you and cheering you on. Thank you very much indeed. If you want to have your say, 344 499 1000 is the number to call. Russell Quirk, he's right, isn't he?
He is. And of course, yes, we have the most expensive energy in the world, even though wholesale gas prices have reduced substantially, obviously, as a consequence of the...
well, we keep being told every do it's global energy prices, but why don't they affect other countries the way they affect ours?
Well, because of our nutty approach to those subsidies that Darren has just mentioned, because let's not forget, when it comes to so-called green energy, we haven't even factored in yet the infrastructure cost, the cost of all those pylons down the east of England and the underground cables and so on. When you factor all of that in, of course it becomes much more expensive, and we continue to have the most expensive energy in the world.
And you have to have the backup, like the nuclear power stations, because when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, I don't think it's doing either outside the window right now. But anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Do get in touch. Not on anything we're talking about today. I'm sure you're absolutely gutted that Greta has been put back on a plane. Does Greta go on planes? I thought she didn't go on planes.
Well, she definitely used to, because there are pictures of her on planes.
That's quite good fun to know. Well, I guess she has abandoned the whole green cause, because they were on a yacht that, as far as I can tell, was entirely powered by diesel across the Med to get to where they thought Gaza. Anyway, coming up in a moment, we're going to talk to the brilliant Brendan O'Neill about, well, you know, everything. Do stay tuned. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning, welcome back. This is Talk. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:35 is the time. Let's talk to our next guest now. Brendan O'Neill, chief political writer, of course, at Spiked Online. He's also the author of a brilliant book on what's happened on October the 7th after the pogrom. 7th of October, Israel and the crisis of civilization. And we will no doubt get to that topic in just a couple of moments. A very good morning to you, Brendan.
Hi, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Let's talk about the winter fuel allowance, which everyone over the age of, or pension age, got until last winter after the announcement within just weeks of Rachel Reeves taking office as Chancellor last July. Then it got down to just those who are on the very lowest incomes for around about £7,000 a year on pensioner credit, some 10 million lost out. Now, yesterday, we had an announcement just about this time yesterday that no, actually it's going to go to three-quarters of pensioners. If they're on an income of £35,000 or less, they are going to get it. Why do you think there was this U-turn? And is it down to, as Rachel Reeves has said, and I no doubt she's saying at GMB Union's Congress, she's speaking out right now, that it's all down to the fact that she's fixed the economy?
Yeah, I doubt very much that it's down to her fixing the economy. It's more that I think they realised just how spectacularly unpopular this was and what an own goal it was for Labour to think that it could just take the mick out of pensioners like that, the bedrock of this society, the people who've been working for decades to keep this society going. The thought that the idea that they could raid their bank balances and take their money was preposterous. I think what it demonstrates is that this Labour government cannot read the room. It is so out of touch with ordinary people's thoughts, with public sentiment, that it really thought it could do something like that to pensioners and that there wouldn't be blowback. So the real story here is that we're ruled by a government that doesn't understand British people.
I mean, yeah, that's kind of it. There is a fair point, though. A caller of ours that just made the point, Darren, that, you know, we only need a winter fuel allowance because our energy prices are so high. Well, that said, we had the winter fuel allowance put into place before we had the complete madness of net zero. But actually, we have low pensions, we have high energy costs, and lots of and homes which are very badly insulated because a lot of them were built in the 1950s, cheap as chips post-war. That actually we've kind of created the problem why we need to have a winter fuel allowance in the first place. What would you say to that?
Oh, I agree. It's the worst of both worlds. So on the one hand, we keep hiking up energy prices with this religion of net zero, this lunatic end of times religion, which says that unless we cut carbon by a certain amount in 10 years, we're all going to fry in an apocalypse. Completely untrue. So they've devoted themselves to this cult, which has the effect of raising those prices. And then they have to bring in this allowance to help older people pay for the basics of life. Yeah. And then they take that allowance away. I mean, as you said earlier on, this is down to the Tories as well as Labour, but we are ruled by dumb people who keep creating these kinds of consequences and don't even recognise that they're responsible for them. This
is part of the problem, isn't it? It's, again, a lack of sort of thinking through policies. And it's interesting, even those people who are much better number crunchers, and I think you or I probably are, pointing out that they said they'd raise up £1.5 billion from this Winter Fuel Allowance Act, and it was necessary, it was all very necessary. Turns out they have, even the Treasury thinks it's about a third of that. Others are saying it's far less than that. It's only about 250 million. These are large sums of money in the big scheme of things, but not in government terms. But they've already spent that 1.5 billion. That's been accounted for elsewhere. So now they won't have that money, even though it was going to be less than it was. So it's an uncosted policy and put the government into more debt unless we have more spending cuts elsewhere or tax rises. I mean, none of this adds up.
None of it adds up. And I've seen that figure as well. 250 million is the kind of lower end of what some people think it will have raised. That's a lot of money to ordinary people like us, but that's peanuts when it comes to government. That is nothing in terms of public spending. So it looks like the whole thing was a complete waste economically and politically and morally. On every front, this was a disastrous idea. And the fact that it was pushed through is indicative of a ruling class that just doesn't know what it's doing from one day to the next.
That is the worry, isn't it? And again, the civil servants are just as bad. And I want to come on to Greta and Israel because, again, very much in the news recently. But Today we found out that 300 Foreign Office civil servants who apparently still think they're political activists, not civil servants, say, we don't like the Gaza policy. We think the UK is basically complicit with what's happening in terms of Israel policy in Gaza. And we're not happy about it. And they've been told by the two most senior civil servants, I think quite rightly, well, if you don't like it, you can resign. It'd be a perfectly honourable move, but you can resign. I find that quite refreshing. Do we hope that they do all resign?
Absolutely. I could not agree more. If you don't agree with such an important policy, which is that we stand with the Jewish state as it fights back against the army of anti-Semites that killed 1,200 people less than 2 years ago, if you don't agree with that central plank of Britain's foreign policy, then bugger off. You should not be in the Foreign Office. That's not where you belong. And, if you want to keep your disagreements to yourself, or you want to raise them privately over lunch with your friends, or maybe even raise them with your boss, that's fine. That's what workplaces are like. But the idea that they can club together these 300 supposedly, socially aware people.
No, I think you'll find they're neutral. If you check more closely, like the BBC.
That's exactly what they think of themselves, isn't it? That they are neutral, they're being objective, when in fact we know that they are just activists masquerading as civil servants.
Brendan, Brendan, I think you need to keep up with all the actual... They are the good people. Yeah. You and I are genocidal baby killers. Do try to keep up with all the terminology.
That is exactly what they would say. And, the thing is that these people turn a blind eye to what started this war. They turn a blind eye to the fact that Hamas is still fighting this war. Hamas is still firing guns and missiles. It's still killing IDF troops. The idea that this is just a one-sided genocidal onslaught by Israel against the Palestinian people is a gross lie. It is not based in fact. It is based in a moralistic hatred for the Jewish nation. That's what's driving a lot of this anti-Israel sentiment. And the fact that there is some of that kind of sentiment in the Foreign Office itself, the grand old institution of British diplomatic affairs, that horrifies me.
It really does. It worries me an awful lot. But let's talk more specifically about what has been going on, not just in Gaza, but in Israel. Greta Thunberg and her little gang, the little Freedom Flotilla, didn't quite make it to Gaza. They were intercepted by the Israelis. Claimed by Greta Thunberg in a video recorded before they were intercepted and handed bottles of water and bread and life jackets, that she was being kidnapped. She was being kidnapped, which I think is quite an outrageous thing to say when there are people, hostages still right now, 20 months on, still below ground, being tortured and beaten and starved by Hamas, the people who she basically is giving succour to. Israel has just released photographs of Greta Thunberg being deported after her Gaza flotilla of symbolic aid to the Gazan people was seized. Interestingly, the Israeli authorities were going to plan to show these Hamas apologists, which is what they are, the 45-minute video, which I'm pretty sure you've seen, of the horrors of what happened on October the 7th, because there's so much borderline, denial of what happened on October the 7th by these sorts of people. They refused to see it, but they've been put on planes. What's interesting, of course, I thought this climate campaigner didn't go on planes, but apparently quite happy to get on a plane out of Israel.
I hope she is going to offset the carbon of that flight. That's what I'm thinking.
Plant a tree.
She's got to plant some trees when she gets back to wherever she lives these days. But, Julia, if it's true that Greta and her idiot friends refused to watch the footage of 7th of October, we need to talk about how disgusting that is. To refuse to look at the horrors committed by those anti-Semites against Jews in Israel 20 months ago, that is unforgivable. That is pure moral blindness. Yeah. And these are supposed warriors for human rights, and they refuse to look at one of the worst assaults on human rights of this century so far. Yeah. These are people who call themselves anti-fascist, and they refuse to look at the truth of what a gang of fascists, 6,000 gangs, fascists, did to Jewish people on 7th of October 2023. This is moral blindness. And I think it probably is true. And it's of a piece with the left's attitude to 7th of October, where they continually downplay it or deny it because they can't face the truth that the side they have taken in this war is the side that did the worst thing to the Jewish people since the Nazis.
Yeah, absolutely. It is extraordinary. And again, I'm interested by why they chose to get a flotilla to Gaza, where aid is going in, and where, I I mean, I've not seen any skeletal pictures, I must be honest with you. I'm sure things are difficult. They're being bombed. I completely get that. You're living under Hamas. Life's pretty difficult. But I'm not quite sure. We've been told about a famine pretty much since the beginning of last year. It doesn't seem to have actually come to pass. But I'm interested that they didn't think that they should send a flotilla or send their symbolic aid to the people of Sudan, where there genuinely is mass killings going on, or China. I mean, they're not that concerned about the Uyghur people in China, obviously, or maybe Syria, when Assad was slaughtering people. They seem to be very fixated on the people in just one strip of land. And I know you and I've talked about this before. I can never work out what it is about this particular conflict, which exercises so many people like this, but other sort of conflicts where far more people die and far more people are being subjugated, they're not that bothered about.
Exactly. I've asked this question so many times. I know you have as well, not only over the past 20 months, but over the past 20 years. Why are they so obsessed with this one tiny country that's the size of Wales and it's the only Jewish state in the whole world? Isn't that just curious?
What can it be?
What can it be? You know, and I've never heard one satisfactory answer to that question. And then they go mad at you if you say, is it because it's a Jewish nation? Well, give me another explanation, and then we will weigh that up. But, you know, in the 7 days that Greta and her chums were on their stupid boat, Israel gave out 10 million meals to people in Gaza, which I think it should. People in Gaza
It's not enough food for 2 million people, to be fair.
Yeah, they gave out millions of meals to people in Gaza while Greta and her chums were bloviating on their boat to any media channel that would listen, were taking their selfies, were pontificating, were posing as the saviors of Gaza. Yeah. They were doing moral pantomime while Israel was doing actual aid. And, you know, it's so true what you say. The suffering in Sudan at the moment is unimaginable. Children under the age of 5 are literally starving to death. And the world has turned away because the world is so obsessed with what Israel is doing in relation to its war on Hamas. It's unforgivable.
It really is. Brendan O'Neill, you've been brilliant on all these topics. Chief Political Writer at Spiked Online, thank you very much for joining us. Russell Quirk, why are they so obsessed with the Gaza in Israel?
Do you think it is just the Jew thing? I mean,
the Jew thing.
Do you think it is that?
I think,
do you think they just don't like Jewish people?
I'm beginning to suspect that
do you think
might
it might be because they're anti-Semitic? Do you think? Or why don't they just admit it? Why don't they just say, this is what we think of the Jewish people and the Jewish race?
Very conversation on the tube home last week with two people with their red kaffirs who it turns out had been at the, it would appear they'd be on the way back from the protest at the House of Commons.
I'd love to have been there.
And I just said, I'm gutted I didn't remember. They were sporting them like flags very proudly in a look at me, look how virtuous I am. And I said I was gutted I'd forgotten my Star of David flag. And this prompted the most venomous screaming and shouting at me about being I was a baby killer, I was a genocidist and everything, and he kept talking about, and he said Zionist to me, Zionist, and I said, why don't you say the word you want to use? You know, the one that begins with J. Go on, say it.
And when did Greta go from being this kind of climate change champion to all of a sudden being an extreme left kind of Hamas supporter?
Almost like these things are very entwined.
Well, and when next? Are you going to pop up in LA at the riots tomorrow?
Probably, yeah. But they're not big on rule of law. But there we are. 10:48 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. Love to hear your thoughts on this. As always, 0344 499 1000. We're going to be talking about that comment from the NATO chief saying basically we better learn to speak Russian if we are not going to ramp up defence spending. Do you agree or not? Give us your thoughts. This is Talk.
Well, look, you can't put out 90% of a fire. If you do that, it just burns back. And that's really what Israel is dealing with. It has to win over this jihadi menace because they've said themselves that they're going to do October the 7th again and again and again, so long as they can. The only way to solve that problem is to take them out, to obliterate them, to take them away from power in Gaza. And look, this isn't a war that anybody in Israel wanted. This isn't a war they asked for, that they started, but it's a war they've got to finish because they're up against an enemy that doesn't respect human life.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. I'm joined still by Russell Quirk. I'm joined also now by Mace Gifford. He's a former British volunteer fighter, both in Ukraine and indeed in Syria. And he joins us to talk about what the NATO Secretary-General has been saying. A very good morning to you, Mesa.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. So you're someone who's, unlike me, I'm an armchair general. You've actually been on the front line, in the trenches, twice now. But interesting comments from the NATO Secretary-General on a visit to Britain and a speech at Chatham House, where he said that people in Britain had better learn to speak Russian if the government doesn't ramp up defence spending. He wants defence spending to go up to 5% of GDP. It's currently at 2.3%. It's going to slowly ramp up to 2.5%. Ambition, we're told, to get to 3% sometime in the next decade. But he's saying no, and it's something Donald Trump's White House has been saying as well. We need to be looking at basically, 3.5% defence, 1.5% cybersecurity, border controls and security and the like. But we really need to ramp that up much sooner and much, much more. Is he right?
He's absolutely right. We've underfunded the UK military, successive governments have, for a very, very long time. We've eroded their capabilities. We've hollowed out the UK's ability not only to defend itself, but its resilience to actually be immune to terrible things like a terrorist attack, as well as a conventional attack from a peer state.
We're told our forces are among the best in the world. Our elite forces, the SAS, SBS and others, are up there with the best. Is that true? But we don't have the men and women on the ground.
Absolutely, that is absolutely the case. We've got a lot of talent in not only in the MOD, within the SAS, etc. We also have it within MI5, MI6. We've got a lot of resilience there in terms of the people that we've got. But in terms of the resources we're allocating them, it's just not enough. And we do need to be investing in innovative new systems to stop the new threats that are emerging.
And there are a lot of new threats, we are being told. It's not just obviously what's the threat from Vladimir Putin in Ukraine, but other NATO allies. And of course, we have, under Article 5 of the NATO Treaty, a duty to protect those allies, whether it's Finland or the Baltic states or others. But we also have got the rising threat of Xi Jinping in China and the threat to Taiwan, and indeed the rising threat of Donald Trump's White House and the American general sort of view that, Europe, it's up to you to defend Europe rather than us having to provide the funds and the weaponry for that. Do you think the White House stance on this is a reasonable one?
I don't. I think they've gone about it in an incredibly bad way. The argument that Europe has not done enough to defend itself is absolutely correct, and successive American governments have been arguing that for a long time, and we just haven't been hearing it. We have made our bed, and we're lying in it at the moment. So there is a long way to go. But as you correctly said, certainly by 2030, we need to have a credible force because the world is becoming much more dangerous. China wishes to take back Taiwan. It's got other
they stated that they will. They stated that they will. They're what, 8% of their GDP currently on their military. I think that's a message.
Yeah, of course. And Russia has already invaded Ukraine. It's already shown its through its utterances and through its actions in places like Georgia, etc. It is going out of its way to expand its borders. And so some of the most dangerous states around the world are watching this, and they're learning from it. And with our own forces hollowed out, unless we create that resilience within our own country, unless we make that investment, we will become easy targets. And that's what Mark is trying to say.
Okay, you're saying easy targets. I mean, as Russell Kirk was saying earlier, no one really thinks, Russia is going to, suddenly land helicopters or boats on the shores of Calais. I mean, they could. Obviously, we're unprotected right now from men without passports, let alone rifles, arriving from Calais, where they wave them off on the shore, the French police. But we're not going to be invaded by Russia, people will say.
We're not going to be invaded by Russia. We've got the English Channel has defended us for 1,000 years, and we do have there's 1,000 miles of Europe that Russia has to push through before it gets to us. But either way, what happens abroad affects us. We are an interconnected world. We're an interconnected country. And this new policy of Russia of simply forcing its way into countries in Eastern Europe, Ukraine, it aspires to take the Baltics, other places as well. It will simply invade these places, put up a ring of steel, and then hide behind its nuclear weapons. And this encroachment not only undermines our values, because we're supposed to be Europeans, we're supposed to be defending ourselves and defending our sovereignty.
Yes.
But our economy, it's going to absolutely wreck our economy if China is allowed free reign in Taiwan, if Russia is allowed free reign around the world too, and if it goes even worse to places like Iran, etc. So we are in an interconnected world. We do have to take this seriously, and if we don't, we will suffer, and we will suffer badly.
And this is the thing, the impact that we saw on the invasion of Ukraine. Okay, some people say it was sanctions on Russia of oil and gas, but actually a lot of it was that we couldn't get wheat, sunflower oil, fertilizer for our own crops out of Ukraine because of that invasion. And again, we rely on so many interconnected trading routes, economic routes, and that's where Taiwan becomes a big issue, because virtually everything we buy is coming from China. Now, they might want to continue to sell to us, but if we have blockades, the microchips and the like, that are available from Taiwan, there is a lot that perhaps we just don't realise, many people don't realise, that is interconnected. We need to have, safe passage on the seas for our economy to survive, in which case spending 5% of GDP on defence is a drop in the ocean compared to the hit to our economy, like we've seen in recent years from lockdown and from the Ukraine war. 5% of GDP is going to count as nothing compared to those hits.
It's an insurance policy. As you are prepared to insure your car, insure other high value assets of your own, the UK, if we inject money and we focus on training, if we build capability, we are inoculating ourselves against future crises. And the point is that if a crisis comes along and we are not prepared for it, we have to throw everything at it, and we have to spend hundreds of billions of pounds. We have to divert resources away from the economy to suddenly start dealing with a terrible problem that will also cost lives, innocent British lives. So the point is that we inoculate ourselves against that crisis by investing in defence, doing it in a structured and layered way, and most importantly, as we look to the future and we start building new relationships post-Brexit, we start growing out and we start aspiring that our country might start growing again, we need to be focused on defence. It's a major part of that.
Absolutely. Macy Gifford, former British volunteer fighter in Ukraine and in Syria, thank you so much for joining us. Really briefly, Russell Quirk, coming back on what you said there.
I still think Mark Rutte's comments are ridiculous in terms of the whole Russian thing, but notwithstanding that, let's just be clear, increasing to 5% of GDP is another £60 billion per annum. Where's it coming from? Tell you where it should come from. Get rid of net zero, get rid of all our asylum costs, get rid of carbon capture, and we can pay for it.
Yay! I'm all favour all of that. Answers on a postcard. How would you deal with it? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Just some breaking news for you, though, as we head to the top of the hour from Austria. It now appears that 9 people have been killed in that Austrian school shooting. That's been confirmed by the mayor of Graz, the city in Austria, where we've seen a school shooting. We'll bring you more details on that as we get it. This is Talk, Home of Common Sense.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yay!
8722, start your message with the word talk. Who would you send to space and why?
The person I would love to send to space would be Mr. Keir Starmer.
and then I would tell the Galactic Empire that he was part of the Rebel Alliance and let them blow him away with the Death Star. No Brits was involved, no fingers could be pointed.
You carry on taking the medication, George. Yes, I'd send all the Labour government to space with a one-way ticket and throw in the SNP for being useless. They're all a bunch of... Oh, all right, fair enough.
One person, quite frankly, I think needs to go to space in a one-way journey is Jeremy Kyle. He goes on about his age one more time, how he's 60 this year, he was 59 last year, repetitively over the course of the weeks and months. We have to hear him, I'm 60 this year, I'm 60 this year.
Richard Tice, did you put that cheeky bugger up to that?
I'm hoping he's going to send me the invoice because that was absolutely brilliant.
Which MP would you send to space?
Oh, no, I'll get in terrible trouble if I answer that. But it's fair to say there's quite a long list.
The sad thing is about sending people into space on a one-way ticket is I don't think that we've built a spaceship big enough to take the lunatics off this planet. I mean, from the net zero loonies to the transgender loonies to the racists to the terrorists, there is just so much to the wokerati. We need some big spaceships.
Big spaceships.
Good evening. I never know how you're going to start this conversation, Jeremy.
Katy Perry went to space today, OK? Who would you send... I'd love her to say what I wanted to, but I'd never disrespect her. Who would you send to space who could never come back?
Well, I'd be happy to send Ed Miliband to space, I think.
Oh, that is an outrageous question, so I'm not even going to answer that question.
Sam Matterface, so you get the job, yeah? Come on.
No, Sam Matterface, I tell you what, there's no.
I think David Lammy would be the person I'd want to send up in space and never come back again.
Yeah, the problem is how much would the bill be for him to munch through whatever food on the way there?
Hey, it worked.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, thank you so much for your company. Lots to talk about, lots about what's going on at home and abroad, but let's get you up to date on that breaking news coming from Graz, the second biggest city in Austria, where there have been reports of a school shooting. It's a secondary school in the city. The mayor, Elke Kerr, has confirmed that 9 people are now known to have died. That includes 7 students, 7 pupils at that secondary school. Some video has been released of gunshots firing out at the secondary school, screaming being heard from, sounds like from teenagers, but they've confirmed there have been other injuries, but 9 people now confirmed dead, including 7 pupils at the school. Very, very, very worrying scenes. We've had the armed police racing to the scene, ambulances and others, and indeed a helicopter as well. We'll keep you up to date on any developments there. Lots of reports, as always happens in these cases, circulating on social media, unless they are verified, unless they're from good sources. Please don't share them. There are some of the usual claims being made. We don't know yet any details about the shooter in this case, or even if the shooter is one of those who is dead or not. So we'll keep you up to date on that as we get it in. We'll bring it to you here first at Talk. We're also going to be talking about Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor. She's been giving a speech today where she, GMB union, and she's once again facing calls for her to apologise. This after putting 9 million pensioners through what everyone's calling winter fuel misery. One of the first announcements she made in July last year, after she became the Chancellor of the Exchequer, was to cancel universal winter fuel payments for £300 a year to all pensioners. Just those on the lowest incomes were able to get it. That meant an awful lot of people who were on very, very similarly low incomes had to choose between heating and eating last winter. Well, after a massive outcry from pretty much everybody but the Chancellor and the Prime Minister, they have a U-turn. They're not calling it a U-turn, of course. They're claiming they've sorted out the economy. everything's fine now, and that's why they can afford to hand it back to, well, 9 million pensioners. Those who are on the highest incomes, 35 grand or above as a pension, or their savings and other income, they will no longer be getting that payment. Seems reasonable to me, but why didn't they do this in the first place? What I want to know from you is, should Rachel Reeves apologise to pensioners for this? A lot of you are saying, no, sod the apology, we'd rather she resigned. Is that the answer? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call to have your say. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can also get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Right now, also, Nigel Farage is speaking. He's announcing who is going to be the new chair and the new deputy chair of Reform UK. It's expected that former MEP and broadcaster David Bull, I believe he may be of this parish, is to replace Zia Youssef as chairman. Of course, he resigned as chairman in a fit of pique over a row over a question about burqas from the new MP, Sarah Pouchin. He then came back, but not as chair. So who's going to be the chair? Who's going to be the deputy chair? Well, we'll find out as soon as we know. We'll bring that to you. Interesting, actually, that Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, in her speech this morning, referred to Reform as the main opposition rather than the Tories. Very interesting. Also going to talk more about that billions of pounds going into nuclear power to keep Britain's lights on. Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary and Net Zero Secretary, finally actually seeing some sense on this issue, but it's not going to be enough, and it's going to cost us a fortune, and the lights could still go out before the Sizewell reactors are actually working. So we're going to talk about all of that and plenty more besides, and joining me for all the chat, I'm delighted to say today, is political commentator Russell Quirk. Good morning to you, sir.
Glad to be back, Julia.
Always great to have you on the show. Let's just talk about, Ed Miliband is in the news in terms of big money spends, but actually it's winter fuel allowance and Rachel Reeves that is still on the front page. It's still the concern of ordinary people. And it's not just people who don't get it themselves, didn't get it last year, losing out their 300 million. It's worrying about their parents, their grandparents, worrying about their neighbours. This was an extraordinary shot in the foot that the Labour Party had. Do you think that just reinstating it for most pensioners and apologising would be enough?
Apologising and resigning, which I think is certainly what most are calling for in terms of Rachel Reeves. I think that would just about suffice. But let's talk about the politics of this for a second. How on earth was this ever allowed to happen in the corridors of the Treasury in Downing Street?
Well, apparently the Treasury have been pushing for this for a long time.
Well, the Treasury would, I suppose, because it's just numbers, isn't it? And it's just a saving. And it's a bit like, and obviously I don't want to get diverted here, but, the family farm tax. Thinking, well, they're all rich farmers and, they're not going to vote for us anyway.
They've got Range Rovers, they must be rich.
Look, they're all like Jeremy Clarkson, they're all millions and millions of pounds. We don't like them, we don't need them. But of course, the backlash from the wider public, even if you're not a pensioner, like you and I'm not quite there yet, of course, we do not want to see the vulnerable in society that have paid into the system for decades and decades persecuted. It's as simple as that.
Not persecution, but it kind of is. It's dumb politics, but also the idea that only those pensioners who are on pension credit would need it when they know that someone on, £1 more and is not eligible for pension credit is struggling. They're not going, oh, well, I'm rich now. Also, there's something like 800,000 pensioners who would be eligible for pension credit, but the form is so complicated and lots of elderly people are very proud and don't want to claim money. They feel like, no, I don't need to claim from the state. I've worked hard all my life, who don't claim that money. And they knew that. Yes. They knew that. They'd been bleating on about it for years in opposition. It was extraordinarily dumb economically. It was extraordinarily dumb politically. Do you think that by you turning on it, and I'm perfectly happy that, my parents and other pensioners who can quite easily afford to pay for their own heating are not going to be getting subsidised heating anymore on the backs of people who are struggling to raise a family, pay for childcare and put food on the table and pay their bills. I've got no issue with that. But do you think that the U-turn... Is it all done and dusted and it'll be written off? Or do you think that the damage is kind of fatal?
Yes, I do.
It's poll tax level.
Because let's also be clear on the fact that they have U-turned, and it is a humiliating U-turn, no matter how Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves try and dress it up. This will be remembered because they were quite prepared to do it in the first place.
Absolutely. And again, we're the nice people. We're the nice people, those horrible Tories. And again, if the Tories had done this, they'd have been screaming blue murder.
But it's yet another promise that Keir Starmer made before the election, that not only would he not do it, but he criticised the Tories heavily because he presuppose that it's something the
but
Tories
they
would
got
do.
into power. There was a £22 million black hole in the finances,
No, there
completely
wasn't.
made up. They all knew, I mean, all the political parties, and I include Reform in that as well. Everybody knew that there wasn't going to be any money. No one wants to be honest and say we're going to have to tax you all those or have massive spending, because poll after poll shows people want, they want nurses to be paid more and doctors to be paid more and more money for this and more money for that and give more benefits and blah, blah. Everyone wants all of this stuff, but they also think that taxes should rise for the people over there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, there aren't enough people over there. If you want to have all this stuff, we're all going to have to pay more taxes. Yes, there should be more careful spending. Yes, there's a huge amount of waste. I'm sure that you run a private business. I'm pretty sure we could send you into government and you could save a good sort of 5-10% of the budget in a couple of days.
$100 billion, probably, straight away.
Take care of the billions, the trillions take care of themselves. But at the end of the day, we cannot have, sort of European-style public services, but not pay European-style taxes. And I'm sorry, they do pay a heck of a lot more tax than us. But the point is, the reason why they can U-turn on this, they're telling us, is because everything's fine now. And yet, we've seen inflation going up. I don't know anyone who's feeling like, they're getting better off. I mean, again, inflation has come down, but it's going up again, but it's still going up. It's just going up at a lower rate. But we've also got a jobless rate ticked up to 4.6% in April. That's at 1.6 million people. It's up by 0.5 percentage points, but it's still going up. And some interesting stats from Jamie Jenkins, who's a friend of the show. I think he used to work at the Office for National Statistics, and he's pointing out that payroll jobs dropped by 109,000 in May. It's the biggest monthly fall since lockdowns, and that's compared to a year ago, 274,000 fewer jobs.
Yeah.
Now that is businesses going, I'm going to drop people because of the national insurance hike and minimum wage. I can't make payroll anymore, or I'm not going to hire new people. And those are people who are not working, not paying tax, who are claiming benefits. The numbers don't add up.
Anyone that is remotely convinced by this statement today by Rachel Reeves that she has U-turned on this because the economy is now in good shape has got their head in the sand. Not just in unemployment, but the fact that you've got a millionaire now leaving Britain every 45 minutes. The tax take was something like £4 billion less the month before last because of those wealth creators, those business owners and those entrepreneurs.
Those people who also pay a lot of tax.
And those 200,000 people that now no longer have those jobs for whatever reason, basically because of the job tax that was introduced in the budget in October, they now no longer are paying tax. Where do we think we get the money from for all of the spends? Because this government is spending beyond its means, like Labour governments always do.
Well, no, and the Tory government was doing. And again, at the end, they can claim the excuse of lockdown, but they carried on with it long after. They didn't get welfare. They got welfare down. I mean, Ian Duncan-Smith did a brilliant job as Work and Pension Secretary, actually get people back to work. I wrote a big piece, a column for The Sun last week, talking about the absurdity of extending more than a quarter of all kids now at school get free school meals. Really, more than 1 in 4 kids in this country have parents who can't afford to feed their kids at lunchtime. I mean, I'm sorry, this is an abject nonsense. Something is going horribly wrong. But I mean, I'd always people say, "Oh, you're so cruel, you're so harsh." No, the best way, if you want to help kids in poverty, A, encourage their parents not to have more brothers and sisters for them that they can't afford, but B, get their parents to work. And no, I don't mean, working 1 day a week and then claiming benefits the rest of the week.
And at the same time, we've got £200 billion a year being spent on benefits. And we have now £22 million. It's about a third of the adult population of Britain on benefits. So don't tell me that those parents don't have 35 pence every morning for a bowl of cornflakes.
This is like it's lunch, which is more expensive than breakfast, but apparently they can't afford breakfast either. Just to let you know, breaking news, as we predicted, David Bull, our lovely colleague here at Talk, top bloke. He's a top bloke.
He is.
Also very dapper. He's been named as the new chairman of Reform UK. It's been named by, and he's just giving a little speech now. After we've got Nigel Farage and Sir Yusuf on stage. This big show of unity, of course. It's interesting actually because the Prime Minister is also doing a Q&A with students. He's on stage, and actually everyone's been focusing on what's going on with reform. Do you think a lot of this U-turn on winter fuel is not just about criticism from the Tories? Because they can take criticism from the Tories, can't they? Because the Tories are way down in the polls. But actually, it's this surge of reform. We saw it in the local elections. We saw it in the Runcorn by-election with the election of Reform MP to Sarah Patchett. We also saw it, reform surging from literally like a couple of hundred votes to 26,000 votes in the by-election, last Thursday's by-election for the Scottish Holyrood Parliament, where they came third, but nevertheless, Labour scraped back in a seat which they would have hoped to have done very well in.
Yeah.
Is this all about the threat of reform?
I think it's largely that, yes. It's the penny is finally dropping, isn't it? I mean, you would imagine. I mean, the local elections, I think, were about 3-4 weeks ago. And, of course, the Labour Party and, indeed, the Conservatives had their, how can I put this politely, their backsides handed to them in political terms.
Thank you for the choice of language.
Yes. And, of course, the polls since have just shown reform getting stronger and stronger. So this is kind of, closing the door after the horse has bolted in political terms, for sure. But, yes, they're now trying to mend the problems, the Labour government, which they themselves have created.
This is the thing. And again, same with the Conservatives. Everything they do, it's just virtually all the policies were brought in by the last few governments. The last year or two of Tory government was correcting the things they'd done wrong beforehand. It is genuinely painful to watch a lot of the time, I have to say. What do you make in terms of the pressure? I mean, one of the key policies I really care about is getting rid of net zero. Currently, the only party that's fully signed up to dumping net zero is Nigel Farage. It's fascinating when people say, reforms policies aren't fully costed. I mean, they're not. No one's are, by the way, but they're no less fully costed than everyone else's. But actually, any party that is still pushing for net zero, and by the way, the Tories under Kemi Badenoch haven't dropped it. They say they've same targets. I don't even want the targets, but they want to do it slower, not at the cost of the economy. Well, then you can't have the targets. So I'm sorry, Kemi Badenoch, I love you, but you can't have it both ways. Nigel Farage has been straightforward on this from word go. This is a mad policy. Richard Tice even stronger on this. It's a mad policy. It's not going to achieve anything. It's impossible to. It's unaffordable, and it's damaging the economy. You cannot make any sums add up in Britain. You cannot have a big AI industry. You can't bring back jobs or manufacturing. You can't build up defence. You can't do any of this. You can't carry on any of this spending unless you get rid of net zero. Do you think the announcement we've got today about big spending on Sizewell plant, nuclear reactor, from the 14 billion quid of your and my money being announced by Ed Miliband, the Net Zero and Energy Secretary, to go to that nuclear power, the sort of nuclear power renaissance is being called. This follows Hinkley C, which is basically going to, I think, quadruple in cost to something like 50 billion quid. Yep. This won't go online until the 2030s. But this is about keeping the lights on. But the only reason we need to keep the lights on is because no Labour or Tory government built nuclear reactors for what, a few decades.
Since 1905.
They take 3 times as long and 4 times as much as any other country does it. It's 4 times more than South Korea spent on these things. And because we've been obsessed with this lunatic net zero policy, we need to have backup. So we're going to pay double for the same energy when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine.
Well, I think what Ed Miliband perhaps has now been told, either by people within his party or indeed those civil servants that you and I were talking about earlier, that look, this just doesn't compute. This just doesn't add up.
Computer says no.
In Britain, in the northern part of the hemisphere, as such, if you're going to rely on such things as wind and solar to power an ever-increasing population, net migration, 700,000 people a year, and so on and so on, it simply doesn't add up. Yeah. So I think, without admitting it, Ed Miliband has now had to make sure that he fills in the gaps, and obviously that's at great cost because it hasn't been done as it should have been 20 or 30 years ago. But just quickly back to the reform point, people are criticising reform for spending money on things, particularly when it comes to tax breaks and so on. But it's pretty easy. If you get rid of net zero, if you stop spending so much money on asylum, if you stop giving public sector employees inflation-busting pay increases, you save and find, therefore, about 50 to 60 billion pounds per annum. So it's kind of pretty basic and simple political arithmetic, I think. Very easy, of course, to criticise reform if you're on the Labour benches, because, of course, you wouldn't you? But it does add up, I think.
But again, also, no one believes anything politicians of any kind say anymore. So there we are. Let's talk just about what's been going on at airports. Greta Thunberg and her little chums on their little freedom flotilla with their symbolic aid for the people of Gaza. I tell you what, I mean, forget Manjaro and Ozempic. Just have proper food. Eat symbolic food. Symbolic food. You can lose more weight than using even a fat jab.
PR food.
So PR selfie flotilla food works really well. There was, these freedom flotilla activists. They were taken to the airport to be deported. They refused to watch this video from October the 7th. Footage, from Hamas. from Hamas fighters of what actually happened on the day, because these are we're in tantamount to Holocaust denial with a lot of these Hamas useful idiots. Let's be generous and call them useful idiots as opposed to anti-Semites who were doing the cause of a terrorist organisation some good. But there at the airport, I imagine Greta Thunberg very unhappy about getting on a plane. She doesn't approve of planes, although happy to sail, inverted commas, across the Mediterranean to Israel and Gaza on a boat, which, as far as I can tell, never had its sails up and just had a diesel engine running. Very bizarre. But we've also had, now you will have seen the footage over the weekend of a man running across the tarmac at Heathrow Airport, people running after him. I remember seeing it, flagging it to my team, going, what the hell is going on here? Multiple people running after this man who eventually was cornered by ground staff driving vans, get the real men to deal with it. But it was spotted by plane spotters who put the footage up. Now, a talk exclusive, it's been taken on by other media, but it was a talk exclusive from my good colleague Isabel Oakshott, revealed that actually this was a man who was a foreign criminal who was being deported from the UK and was able to escape while he was being attempted to be deported. He was scheduled for yesterday evening. The passenger aircraft was going to India. And the staff expected trouble, so he was wearing a waist restraint, but he was able to give his escorts the slip after asking to go to the toilet before takeoff. And he's running through the airport. Yes, this is a convicted, illegal migrant.
And there's supposed to be a procedure, apparently, which is, go figure, if there is a criminal, a dangerous individual that you're deporting on an aeroplane and he asks to go to the toilet, the oldest trick in the book in terms of escaping.
I've never seen that in a film ever, have you?
Guess what you're supposed to do? You're supposed to have 2 security guards standing outside the toilet door. It doesn't look like that was happening. So
check there's no window.
Make sure that when that happens, perhaps the stairs to the plane have been disengaged. That didn't seem to have happened at all. Yeah. And the other thing is, if you look at that footage, the comedy, I'm afraid, of the people that are so-called running after him.
Yeah.
And the response apparently from the authorities is, well, those security guards actually don't have to pass any fitness test. Why not? Because if you've got to chase criminals wherever they are...
Well, you shouldn't be chasing anybody. Here's my thing. There's a guy who is a criminal who is running across the tarmac next to planes. I mean, we don't know who he is. A lot of people... I'm sorry. Why wasn't he simply shot? No, I'm not joking. I don't mean to the head. Well, do we not have security at airports ready to go? Some guy running across the tarmac, people check, no one knows who the guy is who was chasing after him. Pretty much no one else realised. Sorry, shoot in the leg, ask questions later.
I think
this is a massive security risk.
I think there are certainly countries where that would happen because he's at an airport and because he's a criminal. Who knows what he's going to do? Jump in front of the plane crashes, kills 300 people on board. Can I just add something very, very quickly as well? This thing from the government that we're deporting more criminals than ever. Most of the people that are being deported are going voluntarily. Do you know what we're doing? We're paying them.
I know.
£3,000
a point I've made on air to a minister who
far.
Made that nonsense point to me and then refused to accept that I was right and he was wrong. But there we are. That's government minister's voice. So I don't bother having many of them on anymore, to be honest with you. Just to let you know, current breaking news. David Bull, our colleague here at Talk, has been named as chairman of Reform UK. He's been introduced by Nigel Farage in a speech a few moments ago. Live from that announcement in London, Tim Montgomery, former number 10 advisor to Conservatives and now a member of Reform UK, will be joining us to tell us the significance of what is going on and really, frankly, what the hell is going on at the heart of reform. That's up next. This is Talk.
you can see that he's wearing a black belt around his waist. That is a waistband that is used to restrain troublesome deportees. So when the staff, the Home Office contractors who accompany foreign criminals on those deportation flights think that somebody they're escorting is going to cause trouble, they put one of these restraining waistbands on him.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning, welcome back. 11:26 is the time. Russell Quirk is still with me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Russell, just want to check, you're not about to be named as Deputy Chairman of Reform UK, are you?
Well, my phone is in front of me just in case.
Just waiting. Would you take the gig if it was offered?
I don't know, really. Depends on the benefits. Do they do health and life insurance?
That would be the concern.
Medical.
What's the holiday leave? That's the question. Is it a job anyone wants? Because certainly the last one, Zia Youssef, felt that, frankly, it was a jobless task, not worth his time. That's why he resigned last week. Or was it a fit of pique over that question about bringing in, as we should, a ban on the burqa, asked by new Reform MP Sarah Pouchin? Well, let's find out what's been going on. Nigel Farage has had a press conference in London. Tim Montgomery is there. He's a former number 10 advisor to the Conservatives, and famously went over to Reform UK, where he is now a member. A very good morning to you, Tim.
Good morning, Julia. Lovely to be on your show.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, we know that David Bull, in the last few moments, our colleague here at Talk, has been named as the new chairman of Reform UK, as predicted. What's your reaction to that?
Well, look, first of all, I welcome all the massive contribution that Zia Youssef made to the party. And it was good to see at the press conference, Julia. I don't know how much you saw about it, but Zia gave a little speech. He paid tribute to Nigel. He apologised for those tweets last week. And he's looking forward to, taking up his new role.
I mean, look, we've had all the tributes on social media, we've had all the interviews, and it's a massive, big love-in right now. But it wasn't last week, was it?
It wasn't. But, Julia, you're more of a stable character, perhaps, than I am, and perhaps Zia is. But, we all make mistakes. And, I think sometimes the human explanation for what happens is the best explanation. And Zia Youssef was exhausted. He faced an awful lot of racist abuse. He had a moment of madness. And fortunately, that's what we correct.
And although he's resigned and he's come back to the party, he's not come back as chairman. That is a big job. He had played a massive role. We all know that, in terms of setting up sort of the campaign on the ground, because it's all very well having some polls saying you're doing well. It's all very well doing well on Twitter or X, whatever it's called this week. But actually, you need people on the ground. You need the leaflets. You need people going to door to door. You need that ground, those ground troops. And that's what he's been setting up. Oh, and the small matter of actually finding a load of people to stand as candidates, both in local elections and general elections.
Yeah, and David Bull, I think, will be very good at that. He is more probably of someone who will work well with the grassroots. He's more of a team player, perhaps. He knows how to motivate volunteers, and he'll probably be slightly better suited to that aspect of the chairman's role than Zia was.
We're still waiting to find out who the new deputy chairman is. Do you have to go, if you suddenly get called up on stage, will you be taking that job?
Yeah, I'll have to suddenly run away from the interview, won't I, and leave you in the lurch. That's the line. I was a sort of a political person, as you introduced me, Julia, but I think, like you now, we both have strong opinions, but I see myself more as a journalist now, and I see myself as someone who likes for your listeners and viewers, someone who tells the truth, even when sometimes I disagree with the party. And, last week I got into a little bit of trouble from some people in Reform because I said I don't think the numbers quite add up yet in the budget. And so I'll continue to be that sort of independent-minded person.
And a critical friend. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I don't discuss how I vote in any election. I voted for many different political parties, but everyone knows, I'm good friends with Nigel Farage and indeed Richard Tice and many others in the party. By friends in pretty much all the political parties, but not so much the Greens. I'm not going to lie. They're not big fans of mine, and I can live with that. But that's the thing.
I don't really see you and Greta as Greta Thunberg.
No, funnily enough, I don't know if Greta's that green. She's on a plane right now. But I genuinely think it's much more important to hold people to account. I think we get better politics when journalists hold people to account. Do you think, though, that Reform are holding the government to account? We've had Rachel Reeves give a speech this morning, the Chancellor, after this big, it was a humiliating U-turn. Clearly, she was forced into this U-turn by Keir Starmer. Like, for the love of God, give the winter fuel payments back to most pensioners because this is hemorrhaging us support. It's like a poll tax policy for us. But she was saying today that, Reform are the, official opposition, really, the big opposition, not the Tories. Do you think actually it is Reform right now who are making the political waves and actually driving policy in other parties?
Well, 100%. And I think absolutely the U-turn on the winter fuel allowance is one policy area. I know you don't agree with it personally, but I think Reform is setting the agenda on the two-child benefit.
Oh, they're completely wrong on that. Completely wrong on that.
I know that's what you think. We'll have to have an argument.
Not
about
what I
that.
think. It's a fact.
Yeah, it's not a fact. But let's look for a bit of unity between us, Julia, and that's I just wish Reform was setting the pace on the small boats crisis, because that still is the #1 security issue facing this country. And Labour are all talk on it, and I'm afraid it could easily become a national security emergency if the government don't deal with it soon. So I hope they will I hope that will be an area where Reform do start leading policy as soon as possible, because the more those boats cross the channel, the more the British people are in danger, I'm afraid.
I still haven't quite worked out what Reform are going to do on that front. I know, like, leaving the ECHR, European Convention on Human Rights, they'll probably want to clear out a load of lawyers. My God, you're going to be looking at employment tribunal after employment tribunal. The lawyers will make having a field day at that. I'm thinking you're probably going to have to dump an awful lot of civil servants, frankly, those ones at the Foreign Office who write letters and say, we don't like the policy, and being told to resign. There's an awful lot of that going on. But the reality is, when the government, when Reform say, if we're in government, we won't be spending, 4.9 billion on, and it'll be going up, on asylum seekers, we're going to be deporting those people. That's not going to happen on day one. Those people are still going to be coming, and those people are still going to need to be put somewhere, maybe not in a hotel, in a camp. You're going to have to build that. You're going to have to... I mean, it's all very good, and I'm liking the sound and the direction of travel. But government doesn't happen that quickly.
It doesn't happen that quickly, but I think if we make it absolutely clear that not a single person more will land on the shores of England, or if they do land, they'll be immediately sent to a reprocessing centre. I think you'll be surprised at how quickly you can actually stop.
And what are you going to do with the 120,000 who are already here?
Well, they have to have their applications processed much more quickly, obviously. And actually, the rate of deportation, and then they're deported. If they are not a genuine asylum seeker, they're deported.
Where?
Well, you can't send them back if they're like from Iran or
that's most of them.
But there are also other people that are still in.
So what are we going to do with the ones from Afghanistan and Iran? What are we going to do with them?
Well, I'm afraid they probably can't be deported if they can't be sent to a safe place.
So what are we going to do with them?
People who can be deported.
Well, we're still going to have to look after them then. So a lot of the savings Reform say they're going to make, they're not going to make.
Well, maybe the savings aren't 100%. I've just said that I don't agree necessarily with every single Reform saving, but there's still, Julia, and I think you must concede this, there's masses of money to be saved in the amount we're currently spending. And then it's the zeal of Nigel Farage, it's his commitment to do something about this, unlike other politicians, that means that we will save a lot of money.
All right, then. Tim Montgomery, now I know you're still at, as you can hear from the phone line, he's still at that conference, which Nigel Farage is still speaking at. When you see David Bull, our lovely talk colleague, send our best wishes, not just from me or our colleagues, but also I imagine a lot of our audience for his new job as chairman of Reform UK. Thank you for that, Tim Montgomery. Russell Quirk, so it wasn't you, it's David Bull. Deputy job's still going.
Always the bridesmaid, never the bride. I mean, Can I just very quickly tell you how reform will deal with this, I'm sure. All you have to do, and I say all, it's pretty simple, I think, is to disincentivise the asylum seekers that are not really asylum seekers but are economic migrants. Let's be very, very clear.
Germans have just managed to do quite a good job on that.
The chap running across the Heathrow runway yesterday, guess where he was bound for? India. Last time I looked, India was not at war, not yet anyway. Just saying. No. So take away the benefits, take away the right to housing, take away the ability to have legal aid, take away the right to the NHS.
As the French keep pointing out, it's our fault for being such a soft touch.
Yes,
but there we are.
And the fact that we actually approve about 60% of asylum applications.
Well, when they eventually get through.
And the French about 5%. Look, go figure. This is easy stuff.
It's not complicated, is it? And we provide the translators, etc., etc. 11:35 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to your friend and mine, Donica McCarthy, director of the Climate Media Coalition, about this announcement from Ed Miliband. We're going to boost Britain's nuclear power by a £14 billion spend amid fears of blackouts. Why would there be blackouts? I hope Donica can help us with that. Do get in touch. Love to hear your thoughts on all of the big topics. 0344 499 1000. We'll get your calls after Donica. Keep them coming in. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Welcome back. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Russell Quirk's still with me, and I'm sure I get his commentary and indeed yours, what my next guest has to say. We're going to be talking about Ed Miliband, the Energy and Net Zero Secretary, giving a £14.2 billion boost of your and my money to building 2 giant nuclear reactors at Sizewell in Suffolk. They're going to be capable of providing 6 million homes with electricity. Whether the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine, it doesn't matter. We'll still get that electricity. That's a good thing, isn't it? We should be welcoming that. Maybe we shouldn't bother with the solar panels and the wind turbines that don't work all the time and just stick with the electricity from the nuclear power stations. I wonder what my next guest thinks. He's Donica McCarthy, Director of Climate Media Coalition. Donica, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia. How are you?
Very well indeed. Like, you love a bit of clean energy. You live for clean energy, Donica. Nuclear power, absolutely clean, renewable energy. What's not to like about this announcement?
Well, Julia, I think you and I, you especially, are very concerned, rightly, about wasting public funds. I cannot think of a single decision worse than spending £40 billion on a type of nuclear reactor that the EDF have failed, completely failed to build one, yet on time or on budget. They're trying to build one at Hinkley Point. It's 15 years overdue.
Yep.
It's 3 times the cost, and
almost 4, they reckon, by the time it actually comes online.
So what the government has said, and Reform backing them, and the Tories have said, well, they've done a bad job in Hinkley Point. Let's do one in Sizewell, and let's not EDF pay for it, but let's the poor old taxpayer for it. I hope to God that you and I are on the same page on this.
No.
This is an insane waste of public money.
No, you said you can't think of a bigger waste of money. Yeah, I can. Wind turbines and solar panels and subsidies for so-called green renewable energy, which isn't reliable and secure. I mean, have you been to Portugal and Spain? Did you see what happened to them for 24 hours or so when they lost all their energy for that period of time because they were so reliant on renewables? That's what happens. Wouldn't it be better? Get rid of the coal. If you want electricity that's not reliant on gas, that's fine. Let's get it from nuclear power. It's clean, it's reliable, it's secure. What's not to like, Donica? Let's spend the money on the stuff that works.
Well, I think it's really interesting. After years of listening to you,
wasting
public funds, you are proposing to go down the route of the most expensive electricity on the planet. One statistic is extraordinary. You aware of, you know about not Sizewell, Sellafield.
Yeah.
Sellafield is a closed nuclear power station. Do you know how much it is the source of 90% of our subsidy going to energy goes to a closed nuclear power station. It's got 12,000 people, Julia. 12,000 people working in Sellafield to try and stop it and keep it safe and stop it leaking. And they are failing. And so now we're going to produce another one that we're going to leave to our children to pay.
They always get the children. You always get the children. Do you know what children like? Electricity that works all the time, so they can charge their phones.
Do you believe in investing in the most expensive?
Here's the thing. There's no doubt at all. We are really bad at every construction project in this country. There are 2 things we're really bad at. One is getting them through planning and getting them started in the first place. And the second is bringing them in on time and on cost. Now, our costs of building nuclear reactors are like 4 times of what it is in South Korea. It's the most expensive in the world. And one of the reasons it is because we're just bloody awful at this stuff in this country. But crucially also because we don't have the expertise. We have to import it in. So we stupidly don't go, hey, France, you've been building nuclear power stations for ages and you've got a template and you build them en masse. Can we have your template and then we'll just do exactly the same here? And then we don't build enough to get economies of scale. There are plenty of ways of making this cheaper, Donica, but we need to build more of them to do that.
Julia, let's have this conversation based on facts. Let's take what you just said. You said, why don't we go to France, who build loads of nuclear power stations, ask them to come here, give us their expertise and build it. That is exactly what we did.
No, we didn't. Then we changed the plans.
ADF came over and they're building Hinkley. EDF have built 3 of these. One in Finland, one in Flammable in France, and one in Hinkley Point. EDF, the French company with all this expertise, has failed 3 times. Now, you talk about being dependable. What happened 2 years ago in France? 50%, nearly 80% of their energy comes from nuclear. 50% of their nuclear plant went down for different reasons, one of which was environmental. They ran out of water. Now, the reason why the planning inspector in this country said no to Sizewell, but was overruled by the Tories, is that there isn't enough water in East Anglia to supply Sizewell sea.
Don't they use the sea?
They use 2 types of water. They use seawater for cooling.
We're running out of seawater now.
But no, they use seawater for cooling, but they use 2 million litres of water a day of fresh water for other uses to maintain the plant. And we don't have that in East Anglia. And the minister overruled it, which is insane, because that's why the plants went down in France. There are so many, and you talk about independence. Who controls the global budget for nuclear fuel?
Who controls it?
Russia.
Russia. Oh.
Russia and its minions.
Why?
Its satellite states. They control 60% of the uranium, and so they control the market. So therefore, it's not independent. But now you talk about
I thought China bought everything up.
No, it's Russia controls the uranium market.
But we're still going to be reliant on Russia, whatever fuels we have. And the problem is, of course, that whether they decide they decide to cut cables in the North Sea from Norway, etc., etc. Here's the thing. No, let's come back. You made a lot of very good points. I completely understand.
Thank you.
Do I think that we? I know I've not said that many times before, have I? To you? Is nuclear power a good thing in principle? Yes. Is it a good thing in practice in most countries? Yes. Do we do things really badly, very slowly, and not often enough, and very expensively in this country? Yes. I accept all those points. However, we do need to have electricity. I know, Donica, that you want us all to basically crouch down in caves over little fires for the rest of our lives with our Hessian blankets over us. The rest of us want to lead 21st century lives with energy that's reliable. So
my house is 21st century. In fact, my house is much more modern than yours because my house provides its own electricity.
I live in a beautiful Victorian conversion. I'm very happy about it.
I live in a converted Victorian house as well. That has no electricity bill. I'd make a profit. Since February 15th, I haven't bought a single kilowatt of electricity because I have battery and solar. I want that for you. I want it for the country, and it's possible. In Germany, and in Britain, since we increased, they all said if we take off coal, it'll become less dependable. Actually, the national grid said we have become more dependable the more renewables that we've had.
No, that's simply. We haven't because we can't store. Oh, we've had this conversation so many times, and the facts don't change.
We
can't
had no blackouts.
Store the energy. It's we had to buy, wasn't it like 20 million quid a minute or something ridiculous? We had to buy power from gas because we almost faced blackouts a few months ago.
Britain has expensive electricity because unlike other European countries, the marginal price of electricity is set 98% of the time by gas.
On the gas, yes. And again, we're reliant on global gas prices. Yada, yada. At the end of the day,
it's cheaper.
Tonica, put a full stop in it. Put a full stop in it. At the end of the day, if the sun always shone and if the wind always blew, and
it doesn't crumble.
It doesn't. And if we could,
because at night time, solar power,
be quiet.
It heats my house and cooks my food.
If the sun always shone and the wind always blew, and we were able to store that solar and wind power as long as we wanted and travel, we can't and we don't. Then that's great. But we can't and we don't. And you saw what happened in Spain and Portugal. What if that had happened? Tonica, I'll shut up when you're speaking. If what had happened in Spain and Portugal had happened on a cold winter's night in England, what would we have done?
We have had blackouts in the last 5 years in Britain. What happened? It was a gas plant went down. Around 3 years ago.
But not as a point of deliberate policy.
We are more dependable.
Answer my question.
My answer is that the grid has become more dependable the more renewables that we've added. We've been saying for 15 years we'll have blackouts. It hasn't happened, but you're right.
It happened. It happened in Spain and Portugal.
We do need more storage. What I would do with this money...
it happened in Spain and Portugal. What would have happened if it had happened on a cold winter's night here?
It wasn't renewables in Spain and Portugal. There's been no official account yet. There's no official account saying what it was.
That's exactly what the energy grid company, the energy grid bosses in Spain and Portugal have said that's what it is.
What I would like to see happen in Britain is this 40 billion that the government's wasting on a plant that has never worked in three other countries is to invest that money in insulation for people's homes, renewables for homes and batteries. So we bring down the cost for homeowners. That's crucial. I think you should support that. Support an energy that increases the bills. Nuclear increases home bills, honestly.
Honestly, Donica, I think, with all due respect, I think you just make a lot of this stuff up. I really do. Donica McCarthy, I have to leave it there. Times Against, the Director of Climate Media Coalition. Russell Quirk, he's raring to go. Come on.
So when talking to producers earlier this morning, apparently Donica said the following.
You talked to the producers?
Well, yes, maybe he wasn't listening to what they said to him, a bit like he wasn't listening to you just now. He says these plants, as in nuclear plants, are so uneconomical, no private corporation will fund them without huge taxpayer investment. Well, that's exactly what applies to solar and wind. One of the main reasons we are spending so much money on power is because of this fixation with solar and wind, and the fact that we as taxpayers have to subsidise those plants and the infrastructure and the cabling and the pylons and so on. Absolutely. So I'm afraid Donica can't have it both ways. And frankly, the notion that this country can run its energy on goblin breath and fairy farts, frankly, is really for the birds, isn't it?
That has really tickled me. Now, do you know what? That is a political policy I would stand behind. More from Russell Crowe. That's why he's here. Got loads more messages coming up as well. First up there, we are giving you the chance to win FIFA Club World Cup final tickets. That's thanks to our friends at DAZN. Here's everything you need to know.
Hi, it's Jim White here. Here at talkSPORT, we're gearing up for the Club World Cup in the United States. And to celebrate, we've got 2 tickets to the final in New York on July the 13th to give away. We'll sort flights, accommodation, and give you £5,000 spending money to spend however you like. 18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. All you have to do to enter is text the word football to 83338 by the 13th of June at 11 p.m. and you're in the draw. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission or send your name and number by post to Club World Cup Final Prize Draw, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on June the 18th.
This is a TalkSPORT limited competition run on TalkSPORT Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Good luck with that. Amazing giveaway. Thanks to our friends over at DAZN. Take a quick break. Up next, and get to your calls coming in thick and fast on not just winter fuel, but also David Bull becoming the chairman of Reform UK. You want to hear those calls? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call to have your say. This is Talk.
Yeah, and if you think about the actual cost of this, today Rachel Reeves is saying that the overall cost of the winter fuel payment from making it universal to now making it means tested is going to be £450 million a year. Now, that is a tenth of what we're currently spending on migrant hotels. It is an absolutely enormous sum going to the wall every single year. Meanwhile, we're being told to tighten our belts and other things. And so I think that there is just an overwhelming sense in this country now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on On your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. For me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, Russell Quirk still with me as well. Just bring you up to date on the breaking news from Austria. This is the Austrian city of Graz. It's the second biggest city in the country after Vienna. We are now told by the mayor, that's Elke Kerr, of that city, that at least 10 people are known to have died in that school shooting. We know at least 7 students were among those who died. Gunshots and screaming were heard from the school. The school shooter acted alone, the police are saying, but we understand at least 7 pupils at that secondary school in Graz, the Austrian city of Graz, are now known to have died. Obviously, lots of speculation about the motives, but we'll bring you any detail as soon as we get it. Right now, other breaking news this morning. Very exciting for our colleague, or erstwhile colleague. I don't know what that means for weekend breakfast, but David Bull, here of this parish, is the new chairman of Reform UK. It was announced and introduced by the Reform leader, of course, Nigel Farage, alongside Azir Yousaf, the old chairman who resigned last week, came back into the party after just 48 hours. But David Bull, of course, is the former Brexit Party MEP as well, and has long been involved with Reform. And let's go to your call, so 344 499 1000, because Mark is in Lincolnshire. Mark, you want to comment on this?
I do indeed, Julia. Good morning, my dog.
Every time, he gets me every time.
I know, that's why I do it, Julia. Something we say around here anyway, but, you know. Anyway, I think, you know, congrats to David Bull. It's no surprise that he's the new chairman. I mean, you know, as much as I like the guy, he is very much a Farage yes man, so it's no real shock. Well, let's be honest.
Maybe he just agrees with what Nigel Farage says. I mean,
yeah. You're
not convinced.
I mean, he's a yes man. You know.
Okay, that's in your view, right? Okay, no, it's fair. You want to get okay.
Well, David Bull doesn't really strike me as somebody that's ever really spoken out of the box, particularly.
Well, I mean, apart from the fact that he spoke up about Brexit at a time when it was really unacceptable to be a Brexiteer, but you know, anyway. So, but do you think this helps Reform's chances in the polls and the elections?
Not especially. I believe that. My own personal opinion about Reform, I think they're going to probably collapse before the next election.
Why?
That's my feeling. Because it's in how it's shaking all about, isn't it? We have it with Yousaf. You know, he's tired, he's knackered, he can't go on with it. You know, it's not the best use of his time. Then within 48 hours, he's back again, amazingly.
But are you under the illusion that people all agree with each other within the other parties?
No, of course they don't. But it's good to have differences of opinion. It's good to have different ideas. All I'm really saying is you're not going to get that with David Bull. Like I say, as much as I like the guy, I listen to him every weekend.
Yeah,
he's a great presenter. He talks a lot of common sense, like so many people do. But as far as coming up with new ideas or pushing the party in is
that the job of the chairman? The job of the chairman surely is to go with the campaigning on the ground and actually, getting people, out leafleting and organising campaign offices. That's the job of the chairman.
Well, Azir Yousaf seemed to be quite handy at shaping the party how he wanted it.
Exactly. Well, okay. No, it's a fair point. No, okay, no. We'll put those points to David. I'm hoping to get to speak to him. Hopefully, if I don't, then at least Ian Collins will this afternoon. Mark, appreciate that call. Want to squeeze in another call on winter fuel, which is what we started off asking about. Should the Chancellor apologise after her humiliating, screeching U-turn? Paul is in Cardiff. What do you want to say, Paul?
I'd just like to say to the voting public, don't be deceived by this U-turn. I think all the parties, Conservative, Labour and Plaid Cymru, are scared stiff of, when the election comes next, of UK Reform getting in.
I mean, there is an element where, if Reform hadn't been doing so well in the polls, I doubt very much we would have seen this U-turn. They'd have taken the hit. Criticism from the Tories doesn't really count, does it?
Well, but I think... UK Reform have increased their percentage.
Yeah.
In Wales, I think when that voting comes next year, I think that they'll get in.
Well, that's it. That's the Nigel Farage was launching yesterday, wasn't it? Was this campaign for the Welsh Assembly elections where, and again, with people forgetting, it was England and Wales that voted majorities for Brexit. Northern Ireland and Scotland voted majorities to remain way back in 2016. It'd be very interesting. You're in Cardiff. Do you mind me asking, are you going to vote for them?
UK reform, yeah.
I love that he's calling them UK reform. They're Reform UK. It works either way. I know they weren't allowed to call themselves just Reform, were they? Because some other party with, like, 3 people in had already done it. But anyway, Paul, thank you very much indeed. To Mark before then, lovely to hear your thoughts. So I'm going to get to Russell Quirk's thoughts on what they have to say coming up after an update on the news. We'll get you more details on what's been happening in that school shooting in Austria. 10 people dead, at least 7 of those students. And we'll be talking to Mark Littlewood as well on that humiliating U-turn from Rachel Reeves. And is it actually going to save us any money? We'll talk about all of that. This is Talk.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips in Leeds, it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12 and 60 pence. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks
How
ago.
much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it's great to have your company. Very much appreciate you joining us. Russell Quirk is still here as well. He's a political commentator. And before we go to our next guest, I'm just going to give a bit heads up of what we're going to be talking about in this hour, including, of course, that winter fuel U-turn. Should Rachel Reeves apologise to pensioners? Give us a call on that, 0344 499 1000, text on 87222. You can get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost 1, standard network rate message. We're also going to be talking about the usual attempts to actually get rid of failed asylum seekers and unrest in LA entering its 4th day as the US President Donald Trump has deployed another 2,000 National Guard troops and activated 700 Marines as well in the Los Angeles area. Interestingly, also had some riots in Northern Ireland over a very different cause. We'll talk to you about all of that. Do want to get you up to date, though, on the latest that is coming out of Austria. Just soon after we came on air, we understood the reports at around 10 o'clock this morning there was a school shooting in the Austrian city of Graz. The mayor has confirmed now that 10 people died. We understand at least 7 of those are pupils at the secondary school. The school shooter is among those who is dead. He's believed to have acted alone. Now, some latest information that's coming out is that the school shooter entered the classrooms around 10 o'clock, walked into the school, fired inside 2 different classrooms. I say 10 people dead. We understand that 28, including children, are injured. 4 of those in hospital are critically injured, fighting for their lives. Numerous some footage appearing of the school shooter in the grounds of the school, but it believes he entered 2 classrooms, shooting at pupils shooting at students at this secondary school in 2 different year groups, and that 10 people are dead, includes at least 7 students, 28 injured, at least 4 critically injured as well. And they understand that he had killed himself. He believed that he was found dead when he was actually found. Russell Quirk, I just get some reaction from you to that, because, I mean, look, we've seen school shootings in America, we've seen some horrific terror attacks. We often, these often are calling this a terror attack in Europe as well. A lot of speculation on the motivation of the person in the school. We often, whether it's Islamist extremism, far-right extremism, someone who's mentally ill, or a former pupil. And we know Axel Radicubana, before he went to that kill those girls back in the summer last year, he had actually planned to carry out a mass killing at his old school, and was prevented, thank God, by his father. Interesting that didn't get him taken into custody, but there we are. But I mean, these are the concerns. You've got kids at school, I've got kids at school. This is the stuff of nightmares.
Well, it's bad enough that we hear about these things in the United States almost on a weekly basis. In fact, I would say we now don't hear about them, even though they happen, because it's not news.
My team will say there's been a shooting. How many dead? Only 4? Not a story.
We have become, sanitised, anaesthetised, really, to such things in America. Yeah. But the fact that it now is potentially becoming more prevalent in Europe is really, really concerning. We haven't, thankfully, had a similar thing in Britain since, I guess, the last time was Dunblane, was it?
Yeah.
Thank heavens. But the fact that this is even closer to home in Europe, I don't know what the gun laws are in Austria, but I would imagine that guns are not particularly freely available. Yep. Look, this is horrendous, and even more so that it's in a school with children, a secondary school.
There are some reports, I cannot verify these reports, there are some reports that this was a 22-year-old former student at the school who regarded himself as a victim of bullying.
Wow.
That is what, I cannot confirm, that is what some reports coming from Austria are claiming. I cannot verify that claim, if that is the case. And that's certainly been what we've seen with school shootings in America. And she's often a former pupil.
And often what we see in the aftermath of this is the authorities saying, oh, and actually it was pretty obvious, I'm paraphrasing here, what was going to happen because of their social media activity the day before.
Yep.
Why is that not taken more notice of?
It really is absolutely terrifying. It really is. And we'll keep you up to date as soon as we get any more details. We'll bring that to you here. First, it's 6 minutes past 12. Let's turn our attention back to that humiliating, screeching U-turn that wasn't a U-turn by the government yesterday, announced just exactly 24 hours ago right now to basically renege on that axing of winter fuel payments to all but the poorest pensioners on pension and credit, and returning it to, well, 3/4 of pensioners, although those who have an income of 35 grand or a year or more will no longer get it. Let's talk to Mark Littlewood. He's Director of Popular Conservatism and joins us as he regularly does. Good afternoon to you, Mark.
Afternoon, Julia. Good to be with you.
So this U-turn that wasn't a U-turn, was it the right and sensible thing for the government to do?
Well, politically, I think they had to get off this particular hook. They were getting absolutely whacked in the polls, doing appallingly in local elections, lost the Runcorn by-election. And I think it's worth looking back, Julia, to the original justification they gave for this move. They sort of said, look, we really don't want to do it, but this is an absolute necessity to stabilise the economy. I think one cabinet minister even said if they didn't do it, there'd be a run on the pound.
It was so laughable, wasn't it? I mean, it was pretty much the first major announcement from the Chancellor. It was within, I think, 3 weeks of her taking office, and everyone just went, what?
Yeah, extraordinary. So it wasn't well thought out either. I think I've put to you on this programme before, Julia, that I think if they wanted to get rid of winter fuel allowance but claw some of it back, they should have just wrapped it into the state pension.
I've always said
this, taxpayers obviously pay back more in tax than those who are lower taxpayers. That would have been the smart way to do it. What's particularly bizarre here is I think having concluded that they couldn't make this stick, that they were going to have to get out of it, I think in their shoes, I mean, I wouldn't have started from here, but I would have U-turned completely. Why not just scrap the whole policy, go back to what it was, rather than sort of pretending you've still got a new policy, which I think on most estimates now, on the face of it, will save about £250 million. That's chump change in terms of government accounts.
But the other thing
when
also...
you build it, the admin probably saves nothing.
Well, again, there was always a reason why it wasn't means tested. Millionaires shouldn't be getting this money. No, they shouldn't. But there's a reason why they did. It's because the cost of means testing, all the admin, all the staff, all of that, and the risk of people who need it not getting it. And again, they were happy for that to happen after they introduced introduced their policy last July, actually you may as well just give it to the small proportion of pensioners with a higher income. And I know everyone goes on about all these millionaire pensioners. They've got a house that's increased in value, most of these people. They're not sitting on their yachts, for goodness sake. But there are those who are rich. But you know what? Giving them an extra 300 quid, we're not going to really notice it. A, there aren't that many of them, and B, they're paying tax on everything, and they've contributed a lot of tax. Yep. It is not the thing that is going to make the weather of our economy. It's a load of nonsense, isn't it? But here's the thing. I mean, the key thing here is that, like, they've already committed that money. They said they were going to save, wasn't it, $2.5 billion? But they haven't. So it's a tiny fraction, or 1.5 billion, sorry. But they've already committed that money. And Rachel Reeves, when she made the announcement of pretending it was because they've sorted out the economy, which I think we'll get on to next, she didn't say how it was going to be paid for, because the money that they supposedly saved has already been committed elsewhere.
Yes, that's true. I mean, but it's also right. This is a fairly trivial amount of money, right? So
in the big scheme of things.
In the big scheme of things, sort of whether the growth rate is 0.5% this year or 0.7% this year is probably more important in terms of tax receipts and therefore balancing the books. So I've got a little bit of sympathy that you can look at everything in the round rather than saying, well, exactly how are you paying for this 5 million or exactly how are you paying for that 200 million. That's reasonable. But your wider point definitely stands, Julia, that the state of the public finances is pretty dire. And I think for those of us who were sceptical about this winter fuel payments change in the first place, OK, well, this is now a billion or so not saved. Where are we going to find some savings? And there is a bit of a danger in our public debate at the moment that absolutely every area of government spending is a priority. And if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. So, you know, where are we going to find not a few £100 million of savings, but potentially tens of billions of pounds of savings to get remotely close to balancing the books?
As you know, there are always going to be efficiency savings, which never actually seem to appear ever. And again, they're always going to cut civil servants, which never seems to ever happen, although maybe those 300 who complained about the Gaza policy will actually fall on their swords and resign. And that would be not a bad thing for everybody. Also bad news today, the joblessness rate ticking up from 4.5% to 4.6%. That's in the 3 months to the end of April. Payroll employment has also fallen sharply. Jamie Jenkins, who used to work at the Office for National Statistics, who's been great at sort of cutting through the figures, identifying, you know, it's a city the size of Manchester that have been paying the cost of all all their taxes have gone towards paying for the asylum seeker hotels. But he also pointed out that payroll jobs dropped by 109,000 in May. It's the biggest monthly fall since lockdowns. 274,000 fewer jobs right now in our economy than a year ago. A lot of people are putting that down to, yes, we've got world confidence, yes, we've got issues with the trade tariff war and all of that, but we've also got the small factor of national insurance hike for employers, which is passed on to employers, minimum wage rise. Great thing if you're on minimum wage, but actually it means that the cost of hiring someone, keeping someone on, is massively hit. 274,000 fewer jobs than a year ago is not a growing economy, is it?
No, that's right. And I think I'm right in saying, Julia, that every single Labour government in history has left office with unemployment higher than when it came into
the point Russell made,
exception. And look, I mean, colour me unsurprised here. Look, the general state of the economy is pretty poor, but it's a basic, very simple rule of economics that if you make something more expensive, people will consume less of it. And the government has chosen to make the cost of labour more expensive, both through the minimum wage hike and through
part of the issue that no one, it would appear, I mean, no one can add up and do basic maths in this government, it would seem, but also no one's run a business. Now, they always talk about these ghastly sort of Tory, you know, millionaire, you know, business people in cabinet and things, but, you know, might actually understand the notion of profit and loss. Well, it seems to me that when they're handing out pay rises to train drivers, again, there's an argument for pay rises to nurses and doctors when there's a shortage of them working in the NHS. That's an economic argument about supply and demand. There's no shortage of train drivers. Why would you be giving them a 70 grand a wage packet when there's no shortage of people who probably do it quite happily for half the wages? It is quite bizarre. They don't seem to have any understanding. I've seen ministers and people saying, and advisors saying, well, you know, when people were not hiring and when they were letting people go earlier in this year, they were saying, but the national insurance hike hasn't even hit yet, and it's on employers, not employees. Why would that impact workers? You think that people who run businesses don't make any decisions until April the 6th about what they're doing on April the 7th? I mean, that's terrifying that they don't understand this basic stuff.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, I should also say with a background in economics, it makes no difference whether you put the charge on the employer or the employee.
It's the cost of employing someone.
Yeah, if we clip 10% off from the employer rather than the employee, or do it the other way around, you are still putting the cost of labour up. And the business judgment is it worth X pounds to employ this person? And if it is, you'll employ them. Now, if you make the hourly rate of employing them that bit more, X plus 5%, X plus 10%, there'll be a good number of businesses that conclude that particular person can't be justified on the payroll anymore. It's completely unsurprising.
But again, if you only work in the public sector, you have never had to make this sort of decision. Let me find it, because I know we don't have you for very long. I want to ask you about the announcement from Ed Miliband, £14.2 billion extra to go on a new nuclear reactor. Now, I mean, I'm all in favour of this, because I think it's a really, really, really good idea. We have some sort of a backup for when the wind don't blow and the sun don't shine, where we're going to be so madly reliant on these renewables. But this is for Sizewell. We know that the cost of Hinkley C, reactors there, I mean, I think 4 times what it was supposed to cost. We spend a fortune on things. Why is it that A, we don't build these power stations of any kind, B, when we do, it takes ages and decades, and Z, when we actually do it, it ends up costing 4 times as much as it does anywhere else?
Yeah, all very good questions. I mean, I can barely think of any major government project that doesn't overrun the budget.
HS2.
So if they say it's going to cost a certain amount, I don't know, double it, treble it, probably to get a more realistic estimate. My real worry here, Julia, is we're in danger of having an energy sector in Britain in which every single part of it is either subsidised or banned, right? So we're either subsidising nuclear power or wind power or solar power, or we're banning drilling in the North Sea or banning fracking. It would be far better, in my view, to let the market do its business, within reason. You've got to make sure it's not dangerous what's being undertaken, rather than the taxpayer being on the hook for this. I mean, Ed Miliband crowing that this will create 10,000 new jobs. That's an abysmal rate of return for £14 billion investment. Absolutely pathetic. So far, far better not to have an energy secretary deciding where we're going to get our energy from, but for the energy secretary to set the framework and then say to the private business, bring your own money forward. If you think you can make a small modular nuclear reactor work with Rolls-Royce, good luck to you. But you'll have to find the investment. If you think you can drill better in the North Sea, good luck to you. Here's your licence. Instead of that, we've got a sort of state-controlled sector here, which makes private investment nearly impossible because of the uncertainties. Far, far better to tap into the energy sources that are there, are cheap, but are presently being banned.
Martin Littlewood summed it up very nicely, Director of Popular Conservatism. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Russell Quirk. I mean, it's interesting just on that nuclear issue. Front page news, and it's quite funny because so many of the media, when they talk about this issue, they're all very green. I mean, BBC and Sky, they're all very, very, very green. Green, good. Gas, gas, bad. And they're all completely signed up to this mad idea that we're going to have 100% electricity. I think it's down to 95%, equally unachievable of our. Or they always say of our energy needs from renewables. It's actually only electricity, which is only a fifth of our energy needs. But don't quibble about the small things like how we actually run factories and drive cars and keep everything running and could, for instance, I don't know, make anything, that sort of thing. But there is a point now. You want to know that the state is regulating things for safety, as Mark Littlewood points out. Would it be better if we didn't get involved in any subsidies in terms of the state and taxpayers' money, banning things or subsidising things, and actually let the market rule? Because we want to buy energy, people want to make money selling us energy. Would that be a better way of doing it, or do we need to have state involvement?
Well, again, it comes back to the question of ideology. So the trouble is, if you try to allow the likes of wind and solar to stand on their own 2 feet, they don't, because they require so much investment in infrastructure, as we said earlier.
But then so does every energy source.
But then also, therefore, subsidy. So the subsidy by the taxpayer in terms of getting those things up and running and increasing those outputs is absolutely huge. What we shouldn't perhaps do is to cancel all oil and gas licences in the North Sea and then buy our gas from Norway that actually drills for gas and oil in the North Sea. So we're buying it at a premium from the North Sea anyway, giving the Norwegian government lots and lots of taxation and income and, you know,
which they don't need because they've got a sovereign wealth fund set up from their proceeds of their oil drilling over the years, which we didn't do. We just splurged it on the public sector.
I also think what's amusing is the nuclear thing is really tying the left up in knots, as we saw from Donica earlier on, because they don't really know whether they're for it or not. And of course, it is clean.
They don't like nuclear. When they say they want green, renewable energy and they don't want fossil fuels,
they mean windmills.
They mean windmills. They do not mean nuclear, which is actually, if you did it anywhere, any other country, perfectly sensible and very reliable, and by the way, very safe. You know, and again, works all the time. Anyway, thank you very much. More from Ross Quirk coming up after the break. We're going to take some of your calls. Also, going to be, I'm delighted to say, talking to my colleague, new chairman of Reform UK, David Bull. Do stay tuned for that. This is Talk.
Around.
It is unacceptable, absolutely right. But you have to remember, hotels are only booked when the government doesn't have adequate accommodation that it's provided for asylum seekers. And let's be clear about it. The law says, the Refugee Convention and our local domestic law puts a legal obligation on the government to provide basic housing, and quite often it's shared. And also, asylum seekers don't get a choice of where they live.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, Russell Quirk still with us. And I'm delighted to say we're now joined by one of my colleagues here, the new chairman of Reform UK, Dr. David Bull. Big congratulations to you, David.
Oh, Julia, thank you ever so much. It's an extraordinary day, actually, and of course I couldn't tell you. I was desperate to tell you.
We did guess.
Before the announcement, but
we
obviously my lips were sealed. Did you? Oh, did you? Did you? Yes.
Now,
and of course I had to phone the boss this morning.
Well, which boss? Nigel Farage or our boss here?
No, the boss at Talk. I had to phone him this morning to tell him the news.
Right, OK, so the first question I've got to ask, and I'm sure our audience wants to know, a lot of people already called in who are big fans of yours, are you still going to be on air, especially doing your weekend breakfast show, given how big a job Zia Yusuf, the outgoing chairman of the party, has said? You know, he was worn out, broken. This is a man who set up multi-million-pound businesses, and he said he's been worn out by all the work he had to do as chairman. So you're going to be able to have time to do any broadcasting?
Well, as you rightly say, it's an enormous job, and that's why we've split it into various constituent roles. So my role going forward will be predominantly outwardly facing. So I want to get around the country and talk to our volunteers. Well, what it means, Julia, is that I actually have to get out and about. You know all those people who bang on the doors and put leaflets through the doors and do market stalls? I think they are so undervalued, actually, in most political parties. So I want to get round. I know how hard it is to campaign, so I want to get round and look after them and also act as the conduit back to the professional party. Now, in terms of Talk, I'm delighted to say that after the conversation I had this morning, I will remain part of the Talk TV and radio family. What that means, I'm unclear at the moment, but I think it's unlikely that I will do my weekend breakfast show. OK, well, that'll be very bad news for an awful lot of your audience. I know that people regret that, but we know also we've got a lot of people listening and watch who are big fans of Reform UK. Certainly from the people who call up, we hear that an awful lot. A lot of people who message, although we know we are. I like to think we're able to open to everybody. In terms of what you think Reform UK can achieve, now Zia Yusuf, when he resigned, and he came back into the fold within 2 days, and now everyone's having a big loving about how wonderful he is, how wonderful Nigel Farage is, and everyone loves each other now. We'll see how long that lasts. But he said, look, you know, it wasn't worth his time. Doing this job as chairman wasn't worth his time. What do you hope to achieve as party chairman? What does the party hope to achieve? What's happening in the next weeks, months, years? Well, I think Zia, first of all, was completely burnt out. He was working all hours that God sends. And, of course, what he's done, and I paid tribute to him this morning, he's left a great legacy. Because, obviously, I've been involved for the last 6, 7 years or whatever it is. We have grown the party exponentially. But what Zia did is professionalise that party, put in the branch structure and everything. None of that is easy to do. Zia, I'm delighted, is coming back in. He's going to head up this DOGE unit to make sure that we look at efficiencies in local government. And, by the way, some of the findings are absolutely extraordinary. He's going to do that. He's going to help with fundraising, which is vital for any political party. He's also going to be involved in our policy sort of platforms and how we work policy out. And he is a charismatic and brilliant media performer, so he will also be part of the team on the television and the radio as well. He was very lovely. He called me last night and we had a great conversation
this
about
is
how
all
we're going
just
to move
one
forward.
big cuddly loving. It's all wonderful. You all love each other. That's not what voters care about. What voters care about is what are you going to do? Do you think we've got the Welsh Assembly elections next year? You just had success in a month ago, the Runcorn by-election, and a very, very good show coming through with 26,000 votes up in Scotland in a Holyrood by-election. But, you know, this is about, you know, getting into power. Nigel Farage said he just made it very clear. Of course. He didn't come back into politics on the front line to be an also-ran and to coax the Tories into sensible policies or to get the Chancellor to U-turn on winter fuel. He wants to be in power himself. How are you going to achieve that?
Oh, because as you can see, Julia, if you look at the polls, just in terms of the policies we're putting forward, we're now polling at 31% consistently across the board. When you look at the map of the United Kingdom, it is a sea of turquoise. So people like the policies we're talking about. We're talking about fairness. We're talking about the insanity of the illegal immigration into this country, no one doing anything about it, the cost to this country. We're talking about the insanity of net zero, for example. So today, Sizewell C finally has been approved. All of these things are absolutely vital in terms of moving the country forward. People want cheap energy. We need to help with cost of living. We need to sort out illegal immigration, and that's exactly what we plan to do.
The problem a lot of people are criticising you for, and again, the usual suspects in the commentariat, is that you haven't got a broad-based policy announcement. Again, you didn't even have an official manifesto. It was a contract, wasn't it? Didn't cover all of the last election, all of the big issues. You know, look, you know, you're a doctor by profession, and you know, you need to have detailed, thought-through policies. Not that anyone trusts manifestos, a point Nigel Farage has made quite rightly many times, but you're going to have a lot more detailed policy. Are you all going to agree? Because one of the issues that's happened, and Nigel Farage would admit to this, you know, there's been a lot of fallings out. every party he has run over the years. When you're getting close to the possibility of, you're in the situation in the polls that you could actually be taken seriously as a government in waiting, it's going to get even harder, isn't it? You can't even agree on whether you want to ban the burqa, for goodness sake.
Well, look, that's a matter of personal conscience, isn't it? My personal feeling is actually, I think... Yes, I do think it is, but my feeling is that I actually think the burqa should be banned. I think it is reprehensible in this country. I think anything that actually blocks communication is a barrier to communication and integration. I know this only too well, but living in East London as well, which is we've got silos of people who don't integrate. That is not how you build a great country. Now, that goes further. Nigel talked about this, about facial coverings, about crash helmets, for example, in public places. This is about law and order and safety, and also it's about having shared British values, and we need to make sure we do have that to build Britain back to being great.
Well, we shall wait and see how that happens. David Bull, thank you for joining us, erstwhile colleague, chairman of Reform UK. Thank you for that. Just a quick word from Russell Quirk.
Just want to say how good I am at getting up early in the mornings on Saturdays and Sundays.
Just putting a little pitch in there.
Right place, right time. Thanks for inviting me on today.
Breakfast shows are fun.
Just saying. Yeah, well, you would know, of course.
5 years, I think 9 months, yeah. I did my time.
Joking aside, I think David is absolutely the right person for this role. I think that he's very, very liked and respected within Reform. I think he's sensible.
Everyone's talking about his loving at the moment.
No, but I think you need someone that is liked and respected, and I think you also need someone
and he's been there long
he's
way.
Also a bit of a performer. I mean, he's a broadcaster, and I think that's very important when it comes to being on stage over the coming months and
very
years.
Very dapper young man. Let's go straight to your calls. So let's get to Jonathan, who is on the line. He's given us a call on 0344 499 1000, and he is in Bournemouth. Jonathan, a very good afternoon to you. What do you want to talk about?
Hello, Julia. I think with this government, or if you can call them a government, I think they were pretty much dead in the water in the first month, Julia, because when the winter fuel allowance was taken away, abolished, I think most people realised that was a sign of what other things to come, and that gave them all the information they needed to know, and the writing was on the wall. So I'd say dead in the water from the first month, really.
Yeah, I mean, the poll ratings certainly went down. And again, they have this whole idea, we've got this massive mandate, we've got all these massive, 160-odd working majority, but actually it was because the right-wing vote was split. It's as simple as that.
So what Rachel Reeves really needs to do now, I mean, my advice to her now will be to get on that broomstick and fly into that black hole that she keeps talking about and don't come back, stay there.
I think an awful lot of Labour MPs and Labour voters feel that way. That's the worry for her. Do you think she's just walking wounded right now?
I think I haven't got. This sounds cliched, but I haven't got the words really, Julia. This is beyond atrocious now, and I went to a Reform meeting a couple of weeks ago, actually, down here in Bournemouth, and there was sort of an emphasis on not wanting to make the usual classic mistakes. Moving forward, we've got this fresh. We're in sort of revolutionary times now. We've got these fresh opportunities, and it's a new party, and let's try and get it right and not make those classic mistakes.
Do you welcome David Bull taking on that role?
I like him personally. Yeah, I've spoken to him once on Talk, and because it seemed like. Have you noticed? It seemed like it's been such a mess, hasn't it, in recent months? What we've seen in the media, depending on who you listen to, and it's almost like Zia Youssef was the most hated, and Rupert Lowe was like the most.
Yeah, I'm never entirely sure that Twitter and X is a very good guide on that. Jonathan, I appreciate your call. Exactly. Thank you so much. I'm going to squeeze in Robert, who is in Hertfordshire as well. Robert, you want to talk about winter fuel payments, don't you?
Yes, me and my wife was one of the pensioners who lost our payment. And
did you really need that money?
In all fairness, no.
That's interesting.
Okay,
right.
But we're fairly solvent. But my wife is a WASPie.
Yeah, those are some of the women who basically their pension age rose by 6 years, didn't it? Yeah.
Which Angela Rayner said before they was elected that she was going to reinstall one of the other lies.
And then they realised the multi-billion-pound cost.
Yeah, that's right. But the point I want to make here, I can't see how people's not tumbled. It's a scam. Now, a couple of months ago, the government said that they're going to cut down on the civil servants. So what's going to happen now is they're going to employ more. You don't need to means test this. It's already means tested. It's called a tax return.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just a scam to increase the amount of civil servants.
Put it this way, this number of civil servants never goes down long term. I mean, that's the thing. There was a reason why it was universal, because it's just cheaper and easier to put it everyone. But shouldn't it just be added to the pension, and then pensioners who have a higher income, then they'll pay tax on it, and then that job done?
Yeah, I mean, we've worked it out that we haven't got 35,000 coming in because we're both pensioners. However, we are quite solvent. But what annoys me is the pensioners who said before, well, I don't need it anyway.
Yeah.
And I was sort of like that. But now I don't feel one bit guilty of taking the money off the government because of the amount of money that they're giving away to migrants.
That's very fair point. Robert, thank you very much. You're not taking the money from the government. It's taxpayers' money. Remember that. Thank you very much indeed. 12:34 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. And then we're going to be talking about, well, the latest madness when it comes to, well, just trying to get rid of people who aren't supposed to be here. That's simple. We'll talk about that. Oh, yeah, and we're going to talk about riots, not only in Los Angeles, but the ones getting rather less coverage in Northern Ireland. Very different causes there, and very different descriptions of them in the media too. This is Talk, Home of Common Sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 12:36 is the time. Let's talk right now about, well, you know, trying to keep people out who shouldn't be in the country and try to get rid of the people who shouldn't be here as well, with Robert Bates. He's Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. Good afternoon to you.
Afternoon, Julia. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for doing it. There's quite a few different stories I want to talk to you about. First up, let's talk about a story identified by Isabel Oakeshott, our international editor, about a major security blunder at Heathrow Airport. I saw this extraordinary footage that was on social media, and some plane spotters spotted this man running across the tarmac next to planes at Heathrow Airport, and clearly being chased and eventually, finally, being apprehended. It turns out that he was, what a surprise, a foreign criminal who was being deported, who had escaped after saying he needed to go to the toilet. I mean, this is Flintstone levels of incompetence here, isn't it? And that he had been wearing a waist restraint. They'd expected trouble, but he was able to give his escorts the slip. Extraordinarily seen running across the airport tarmac. I mean, I don't understand. We don't have snipers who don't take these people down. God knows what he could have been or who he could have been. But it turns out he was being deported back to, wait for it, India. What the hell was he doing in this country? A foreign criminal being deported to India. I mean, I just find these stories just extraordinary. Tell us about it.
Yeah, well, I think in this particular instance, what we actually see is a totem of how poorly managed our immigration enforcement system currently is. It's vastly underfunded compared to where it really should be. It receives only about £600 million a year, which is a tiny fraction of the Home Office's budget. It only has about 5,000 people working for it, which, when you actually, for a sense of scale, is about a quarter of the staff roster of Durham County Council. So, the very organisation that's in charge of keeping our borders secure and ensuring those that we don't want to are actually removed is tiny compared to people that deal with bins and
yeah, exactly. And clearly also not very fit, judging by their ability to run. I thought what was really interesting, we've had, and I've had a minister on in the last week talking about, it's like, we've deported 30,000 people. It's like, no. And then I remember Keir Starmer using the word deportation and then correcting himself because he knew it was wrong, removed 30,000 people. But the vast majority of those were people who'd overstayed visas and who were being removed voluntarily and paid for the privilege of that. We're paying for their airfare, which is very different. But this guy, I wonder how long he had been here committing crimes, eventually goes to prison for long enough, and how long it took for us to actually get him out of the country.
Well, by the current cases that we do see in the news cycle, I'd imagine it had been taking us a few years to actually get him even to this point. Fortunately, he was finally caught. But I think the problem here really as well is that we allow these kind of functions to be formed by contractors who, frankly, get paid a very pretty penny for doing very little and for not having basic things that you'd expect, such as minimum fitness requirements for their staff. And as we can see in those pictures, the staff trying to get out of him look like they're being given the absolute runaround. So the whole system, if we really want to get serious about removing people from this country on a huge scale, which is what's needed, then we're going to have to see a massive upscaling in where the funding and where the staffing for these functions comes from.
I used to have a massive issue in terms of the security at the airport, that someone was on a runway around planes. Other people didn't know who this guy was, and I'm just, this is such a major security breach. It's extraordinary. Let's also talk about the security breach. Of course, all these people coming to our country don't know who they are on their boats without their passports. But we've got an Iraqi asylum seeker. He's avoided being removed from the UK. This is just the latest. These are every day now, aren't they, Robert? After claiming that he had a love affair with the wife of a powerful military officer, a colonel in his home country. He sought protection in the UK after arriving, saying he could be killed if he was sent back to Iraq because of this affair, having fallen in love with the young woman in Iraq and having a relationship with her after she married a colonel in the PUK, the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan. The Home Office said there was a lack of credibility in his case, tried to remove him. He lost his case at a lower tier immigration tribunal, but of course at the upper tribunal, where they allow anybody just because they don't like, Albanian nuggets or a paedophile who wants to stay with his kids here. And he's been granted permission to have his case heard again, and if he's successful, he could stay in the UK, basically, because he, got a little bit romantic with someone else's wife. Sorry, are these the people we offer asylum to now?
Well, it sounds like a lover's role play that got a bit out of hand because, of course, there's no evidence that this woman was actually married to a colonel either. That was one of the reasons why the Home Office was so keen to reject his case.
I don't care whether she was.
Well, exactly. Why is this our problem either way? Why are we having to get our heads around different disputes that have happened thousands of miles away? It frankly isn't our problem. And the real problem here actually is the fact that we've got elected government trying to remove someone, saying that their claim for asylum isn't legitimate. We have unelected judges, most of whom are drawn from the kind of left-wing campaigning world, getting to have the final say on this kind of stuff. We need to move towards a system where the immigration tribunal system is scrapped. And we go back to what we actually had in the 1990s, where it's the Home Office making the final decision on who gets to stay.
I'm not sure I even trust the Home Office. I think we should have panels of the public, general public. We can make those decisions.
Well, I like that idea as well, actually.
But only if they're not only watching the BBC. I can always tell people's views. I always say, what's your main source of information? BBC. Right, I know all your views on everything. There we are, we're sorted. Let's also talk about this. It's just there's a raft of these stories. People smugglers exploiting our soft borders, particularly between Britain and Ireland, trying to bring illegal migrants into the UK. These are according to Facebook adverts. Albania, I didn't know anyone used Facebook anymore. Albanian gangs are charging $4,000 to get migrants to the country through the back door. Basically, we'll get an fake Italian ID card, and then we'll fly you to Ireland, and then you can sneak into Britain on ferries because basically you can get in coming from Ireland. and then you can work illegally, or you can claim asylum with your Albanian passport. I mean, and they're advertising this openly. We see this on TikTok to the men sitting there in Calais waiting to get on these boats. We've also got the extraordinary revelations in the Sun. The police, nice to know the French police are doing something other than having a 3-hour lunch. They've been digging up boats deep under French beaches, which are being used. They're finding nautical equipment, they're finding boats. They've basically been buried in the sand, and these are the boats they just come and get out, blow up, and then put to sail with 50 migrants on. This is an incredibly sophisticated operation, all of this. It occurs to me, why don't we pay the people who've been doing all the people smuggling and doing all this? Why don't we pay them to stop it? Because they're clearly much brighter than our officials.
Well, absolutely. We've got incredibly low-grade individuals in the Home Office trying to deal with something that's incredibly elaborate. But the problem is that they've actually focused their attention onto the people smuggling gang. As we know, that is not the problem. The problem is those people that want to come here in the first place. I think with that French instance, the French beach where a dinghy was found, first of all, the French are acting like they found the Staffordshire Hoard or something in that front. The amount of song and dance they're making about this is one dinghy, and as we know, dozens of boats are likely to come across over the next couple of weeks. So that's very much the tip of the iceberg. But we need to get to a position where these networks have no function. These people that are trying to profit on individuals wanting to come into the UK have no customers, because they know that if they are caught coming into the UK, then they will be detained and then within a matter of weeks deported from the country. Unfortunately, as you can see from the absolute mess that our asylum system is, these people will now be in the country at least for a year, having their various cases
and the rest
and appeals, if we're lucky, of course. And then once they are actually deemed to not be legitimate asylum seeker, they then get to stay as well for a long period of time whilst we figure out what to do.
But also,
people don't disappear as well. We see tens of thousands of people that have just disappeared from the
indeed. But also, often people aren't given indefinite leave to remain. They're not granted asylum. So they'll say, well, we haven't granted all these people asylum, but they are actually allowed to stay here. And then we're told, well, and I know this is what Labour are going to do, because then we're no longer giving these stats out from the Home Office of the cost of the asylum hotels. But these people will still be being paid for by us, because they're never going. I mean, again, they're not all rocket scientists and billionaire entrepreneurs.
No, those that do come via the asylum route have an incredibly low economic participation rate. It's,
I'm as shocked as you are, Robert.
So you actually, what we see is the cost of these individuals are hidden in those kind of top line budgets, such as the benefits that is being paid by DWP and HMRC. That's kind of subsumed within the larger pool, and therefore it takes a lot of work to actually figure out how much these people are costing us. And then you also see, of course, the procurement of these houses as well. Yes, that takes the cost off the hotel bill, but then it hides it again. And what are the knock-on effects for people in the rental market?
And they pay, on average, we understand, something like double the local rental prices. So why wouldn't you, as a landlord, want the guaranteed fixed income for 5 years and all the bills guaranteed paid, but not so good for local people needing a home? Robert Bates, you've been a fantastic advocate on all of this, Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. Thank you so much indeed. Roscoe, we need more Robert Bateses. He really knows his stuff. I wish people in the Home Office knew their stuff as well. But it is, it's maddening. These stories, it's every day now. A case of someone who's not been deported or got an appeal, won an appeal, who's had to stay. Total lack of sort of joined up thinking, the huge cost, so little being done, and the flagrant flouting of our borders and our laws that goes on by these gangs.
Let's think back 12 months to when Keir Starmer was seeking office and talked about smashing the gangs. Now we resort...
He's smashing the gangs of pensioners.
Well, yes, but now we unfortunately think it's news, and certainly the government will think it's news, that the French police dig up a solitary rubber boat on the beaches of Dunkirk. That is what this has come to. What I suggested earlier, actually, that we get the Israeli armed forces to control our borders, because they're very good at it. Not now they've dispensed with Greta Thunberg. And the other person I think we should bring in as a consultant, who should be very highly paid, is Tony Abbott. Do you remember the Prime Minister of Australia, who literally overnight stopped the incursion of illegal immigrants into his country?
They did something very different from what we did with the Rwanda.
Well, they didn't have the ECHR for a start.
But it was everybody. The point was, you never made it to the Australian territory. You didn't get onto the shore.
Yep.
Full stop.
So it can be done,
can't
can't it?
I know, and it stopped people, and people stopped dying. If that's your concern, people stopped dying within months on those seas. 12:47 is the time. We're going to be talking about actually immigration, illegal immigration, being a very big issue in America with those ongoing riots in LA, now spreading to Texas and other states as well, as the Trump administration deploys more National Guard, and even the Marines against the wishes of the California governor. We'll be talking to New York Post columnist Adam Coleman about that. Oh yeah. here, and the small matter of some riots going in Northern Ireland. But what are they about? We'll find out. This is Talk. Apparently we're not going to a break, but that's just great. We get more time. I'm very, very delighted. Adam Coleman is columnist at the New York Post. Hope you are ready there. Good morning. Sorry, good afternoon to you, although it probably is good morning for you, Adam.
Yes, good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. Talk us through the latest developments about what's been happening in Los Angeles, because a lot of this seems to be not focused on the battles between the pro-illegal immigration rioters and ICE, the immigration organisation trying to deport illegal migrants, and the police, National Guard, but a battle between Donald Trump and his White House and the California Governor Gavin Newsom. What's the latest?
Well, the latest is that it's actually turned into looting. Initially, this would seem to be a particular conflict in response to ICE going to certain neighborhoods trying to grab people who shouldn't be in this country. And the response to that, but it's now grown into rioting. It's gone into rioting and now into looting. So there are restaurants and storefronts that have been looted. There's videos circulating X displaying some of this as well. And in the meantime, the leadership, Karen Bass specifically and Gavin Newsom, are making this all about Trump.
Karen being the LA mayor. Yeah.
Yep, the LA mayor. They're all making this about Trump.
Yeah.
And
well, they obsess about him, don't they?
Excuse me. Obsess is taking it lightly. That's all they think about. That everything is in relation to Trump, rather than the safety of their citizens, the safety of the people who are, within their jurisdiction. So I don't know. I would hate to be a resident of Los Angeles after dealing with wildfires and incompetence from the management. And now we have riots and the incompetence of management once again.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? And it is extraordinary when both the mayor and the governor have said, look, we're on top of everything. You think, well, I'm seeing the pictures. You don't look like you're on top of it. And a lot of it is reminding me of the Black Lives Matter protests, which turned into riots back in 2020, as we were discussing on the show yesterday. We saw whole neighbourhoods, often black neighbourhoods, black businesses being burnt down. Extraordinary, absolute lack of control on the streets, massive intimidation. People died, $1 billion worth of damage done. I think it's perfectly reasonable to say things could turn nasty. We're going to make sure we need to enforce this. It did seem to be clear to me that, that actually with the National Guard, on the streets, that things had quietened down a bit. And I don't think anyone's surprised by the looting. We've had that when we had riots back here in the UK back in, I remember 2011, it started in London. People think they've got a cause about, someone being shot dead. The next thing you know, actually their cause is getting some cheap trainers or free trainers.
Right. And when it comes to these particular signs of unrest about to come, if you don't knock it out quickly, what starts to happen is people from outside the area come in and use this as an opportunity. So I'm willing to bet just like during the Black Lives Matter riots, most of the people who are arrested weren't from the states that they were arrested in. So that's the danger of this getting out of control. And if they just say, no, National Guard, Trump, we don't need your help, just for political points, then everyone else suffers for it. And what someone brought up that was a very good point, when all of the resources are going towards one particular area and dealing with one particular situation, someone who legitimately needs help somewhere else doesn't get that help.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems to me, from what I've been reading and seeing about what's been going on in California in recent years, they kind of lost control of law and order as it is. I'm not a fan of Gavin Newsom over lockdown. I think the man's an appalling human being. He had kids in masks till mid-2022, for goodness sake. The man is a criminal as far as I'm concerned. But this is, the man who's overseeing. I know what the mayors have different powers. In San Francisco and LA and everywhere. But the opioid abuse, the lawlessness on the streets, the widespread looting. Bottles of shampoo in shops in California having to be locked behind glass screens because of the level of looting. It seems to me that this has become a lawless state already, in which case, I think a lot of local residents, however they voted, to go, bring in the National Guard, sort this out.
Yeah, California, granted, I don't live in California, so I don't know all of their politics in great detail. But what I can tell you is that they've let the far left take control in many different ways. And there are rational Democrats that do exist who actually do believe and our position that we should have strong borders and things of that nature.
Old-fashioned things, yeah.
Right, old-fashioned things that everyone used to agree with. But they are either weak or their voices are drowned out or they don't win elections. And this is kind of the problem that the Democrat Party faces and why they've become incredibly unfavorable. Trump is on the winning side of this issue over and over. Even recent polling, talking about this particular LA issue. Trump is on the winning side of this. So the
No, I'm sorry. I was going to say, I agree with you. I think the Democrat position on this is insane. Gavin Newsom and others are all completely insane. This is not where people are. But also, they try and make this as a race issue. This is an attack on Latinos. Well, I mean, the Latinos who've arrived in California and the rest of the United States legally are the people who are most being damaged. People at the bottom end of the social economic class, the ones who are most hurt by mass illegal immigration. 2.6 million illegal migrants believed to be working in the California economy alone. Gavin Newsom is saying, our economy is in great shape. Yeah, because you're relying on basically, below minimum wage, labour funding everything. And these people aren't paying taxes. These people aren't working legally. These people have no rights. This is exploitative stuff.
Absolutely. And funny enough, I was watching, I think it was yesterday, BBC America admit that California's economy is heavily reliant off of illegal labor.
I'm amazed they did that on BBC America. I'm amazed they did that. But there we are. Adam, thank you so much for joining us. Adam Coleman's a columnist at the New York Post. Really appreciate that. Russell Quirk's still with me. Russell, I mean, it is extraordinary. Even the coverage of this. I was watching a report this morning, and Sky's reporter was talking about, resistance. They interviewed a woman who had just happily with her mask on, always has her mask on. Donald Trump wants to arrest anyone in a mask. Absolutely, including on the London Tube, by the way. She rode her moped directly at law enforcement officers who pulled her off, quite rightly. And then she was being interviewed as if she was this terrible victim and was a freedom fighter. And she was saying, my father's been taken away, he's been deported, we're immigrants, and he's been taken away, unfortunately, because he was here illegally. Oh, so he had broken the law, he lived here for years, and he wasn't here for my birthday, she said. Well, no, because he broke the law and he's been sent back to his home country, because that's what would happen to any of us if we did the same. And the phrase that was used by the reporter was the resistance. Yeah. The resistance to ICE, the immigration and customs enforcement officers, carrying out the law of the land that existed long before Donald Trump.
Well, and can I just say, not just the law of the land, Donald Trump has an absolute mandate to do this.
Absolutely.
He won on a landslide at the end of last year, inaugurated in January, on the basis that he would specifically deport illegal migrants. He is doing exactly what the majority of the electorate that voted want him to do. Yeah. So he's doing the right thing.
And he's got support across every ethnic group and across both parties.
And to the point about California, what it looks like now, I've been to California several times over the last couple of years, LA and also San Francisco, and it is sad. The homelessness, the fentanyl, the people walking around like zombies, the fact that you do actually walk into Walgreens and you're right. I mean, toothpaste, shampoo, behind locked cabinets.
It's like Cuba.
And the fact that you've got idiots like Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass, quite apart from how they dealt with the LA fires that almost destroyed the city because of their incompetence, they themselves have actually lifted the criteria below which you are prosecuted as a criminal. Yeah. Guess what happens when you do that?
Oh, I know. It's almost like we saw what happened with shoplifting here. But we're talking about violent robberies as well.
One thing leads to the other.
It is just extra. Send the army in now. I've got no problem. I think Donald Trump's going to win this one. What do you make of what's been going on in Northern Ireland as well? Public disorder broke out in Ballymena town centre in Northern Ireland following a protest reportedly over an alleged sexual assault case. This happened on Monday. Police said a number of missiles had been thrown towards police officers. The unrest follows a protest about 30 miles from Belfast where damage was done to properties. And this is apparently, there were plumes of fire near residential buildings. A masked man was seen throwing an object at police vans. And basically this is all involving a case involving two teenage boys who appeared before Coleraine Magistrates Court earlier in the day, accused of sexually assaulting a teenage girl in the County Antrim town. They've been charged with attempted rape in connection with this. Now, this has been sort of linked to, has it not, issues of migration.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know all the details of this case. It's all being reported in quite a sort of an opaque sort of way.
Yeah, but and it's confusing, as you say. But and I'm not condoning this for 1 second, but I'm afraid when you treat the public with disdain as the authorities, politicians, and a two-tier approach to policing, you will get the public rise up and show their resistance. You used that word resistance earlier on, and I think we're seeing that in Northern Ireland.
There's not an excuse for fighting.
No,
you know,
I'm not
if you're
condoning
unhappy about anything that's going on, don't set fire to things or throw bricks.
Yes, but let's also make sure that we, as we saw in the summer last year in Liverpool and in Southport, let's make sure that those that are legitimately protesting and using their right to free speech and freedom of congregation and so on, let's make sure that they're not vilified as the far right, Because
absolutely.
there is a difference between those that throw things at police officers and those that are just standing there saying, we don't like what our country has become.
And also, if you vilify everybody who is peaceful just for speaking, I mean, we saw that Southport people just say, but then if you're saying there's no choice, there's difference between words and deeds, then people go, well, I may as well go for deeds then.
Well, and I think
that's when it spills
we'd
over.
rather let Keir Starmer off the hook for what he said in the summer last year, where he said it was all the